Sunlight shines brightly over the peaceful-looking rooftops of a quiet town. Brody, a young red-haired girl with dirt on her face, lets out a soft sigh. Walking down the street with Jeno, she laments how cold the mornings still are. Jeno worries about their sick friend Barry, who had wished them a safe trip. Jeno complains bitterly about the orphanage director's cruelty in sending them out. A sudden tap on Jeno's shoulder interrupts his thoughts, making him turn around. Brody points ahead, her attention caught by someone in the street. She points out a kind-looking noblewoman, hoping she might offer them some help. The noblewoman notices the children, turning her head toward them with curiosity. Brody and Jeno put on their most pitiful, tearful expressions to beg for help. Their act pays off handsomely as they secure 20 gold coins from the lady. Jeno praises her cleverness, thrilled by the unprecedented amount of money they received. When Jeno asks how she always knows who to target, she simply smiles. Her secret lies in her ability to see the hidden wealth within people's bags. Brody reflects on her life, having been abandoned at a troubled orphanage from a young age. She grew up among other orphans, never knowing when she first arrived. The orphanage provided nothing but thin, watery soup for their meals. She inwardly rages at the terrible quality of the food they are served. The harsh reality makes her question if the facility even cares for children. They are left to sleep in a cold, dusty room with only a single dirty blanket. Physical abuse and constant shouting are part of their miserable daily routine. While some are adopted, the rest are sent to beg on the streets. The cruel director intentionally kept Brody there instead of letting her be adopted. He exploits her rare clairvoyant ability to see hidden valuables on passersby. He fake promises to protect her, though she knows he only uses her to make money. Left alone on the streets again, Brody's stomach growls in painful hunger. Though she successfully begged for money using her power, she kept none of it. Starved for 3 days, she heads toward a bakery, wishing she had an emergency stash. Her heart sinks when she discovers the bakery is closed for the day. Overwhelmed by exhaustion and hunger, she collapses against the closed door. She stares blankly, realizing her luck has completely run out. With the streets empty due to the overcast weather, she cannot even beg. Her head throbbing from starvation, she huddles in the cold alleyway. Tears stream down her face as she wonders why she is punished for being good. Shivering in the quiet corner, her desperate thoughts are consumed by hunger. As she silently prays for justice, a tall man in a black suit approaches. His heavy steps echo softly through the alley as he stops before her. Brody looks up in surprise at the sound of a deep voice addressing her. Tears pool in her wide eyes as she meets his gaze. Standing before her is a striking, black-haired man with piercing red eyes. He towers over the small, huddled girl in the quiet street. The red-eyed man breaks the silence by asking if she is hungry. Brody eagerly confirms her extreme hunger, clutching her hands to her chest. He kneels down to her level, prompting her to introduce herself as Brody. He acknowledges her name and rustles a bag, catching her attention. With a gentle smile, he holds out a warm piece of bread for her. As she ravenously devours the bread, the man asks for her age and she replies. Full and satisfied, she listens as he proposes they have a proper talk. He holds up a heavy pouch, testing her by asking what is inside. Using her clairvoyance, she correctly identifies the hidden red jewels inside his pouch. The black-haired man confirms the red gems are rubies, which Brody eagerly notes are extremely expensive valuables. Brody tests him further by questioning if both the large and small stones inside are rubies. Brody's blue eye sparkles brilliantly as her unique clairvoyant ability activates to inspect the hidden jewels. The man is amused that she can see the gems, while Brody quietly wonders if he already knew about her power. The black-haired man gently calls out Brody's name and introduces himself as Eccles. Brody seeks confirmation of his name, and Eccles simply agrees that it is indeed his name. Eccles reaches out his hand, explaining that he has a specific need for her rare clairvoyant ability. Eccles holds the young girl's hand and proposes that she come to work for him. Brody reacts in complete shock to the sudden offer, while Eccles promises she will be rewarded handsomely upon success. Staring up at him, Brody nervously wonders if such serious business talk is meant only for adults. Brody happily imagines receiving food and money, realizing she would no longer have to beg on the cold streets. Despite the promising offer of a better life, a lingering doubt suddenly crosses Brody's mind. Brody suddenly pulls back and questions how she can trust a stranger, catching Eccles off guard. Eccles scratches his head in disbelief, asking the young girl if she truly has no idea who he is. Brody stands her ground in the quiet alleyway, repeating her question about how she can trust him. Eccles asks once more if she really doesn't recognize him, and Brody honestly confirms she does not. Eccles reveals his full noble name as Eccles Tilchales, leaving the young girl thoroughly confused. The scene shifts to the wealthy capital, where the most prosperous land belongs entirely to the powerful Lord Childs. Rumors describe the legendary lord as an incredibly wealthy, handsome, and highly capable man who can achieve anything. Realizing his true identity, Brody gapes in pure disbelief at the mention of the legendary Lord Childs. Eccles confirms her realization, smugly stating that the very ground she sits on belongs to him. Brody jumps to her feet to ask if he is the boss of Chales, though he questions why she calls him Mr. Brody remains puzzled, wondering what title she should use to address someone of his immense status. Eccles gently places his hand on Brody's head, dismissing the title issue with a casual shrug. Eccles reassures her that a man of his standing would never stoop to scamming a helpless child. Brody recalls how her cruel orphanage director bitterly envied Chales' vast wealth, though the Lord is also famously ruthless. She reasons that such a wealthy lord would not lie over mere bread and a single coin, lest it ruin his reputation. Brody boldly challenges him, asking what happens if she still refuses to trust him or work together. Eccles playfully demands payment for the warm bread she ate, leaving the penniless Brody in a sudden panic. Eccles dryly tells her she will become the youngest debtor in his guild to pay off her food debt. Brody recalls the terrifying rumors that the Child's Guild relentlessly hunts down debtors to the ends of the earth. Brody stammers that he offered the bread first, but Eccles counters by teasingly questioning why she eagerly snatched it. Shuddering in frustration, Brody inwardly fumes that this wealthy lord is actually a tormenting devil in disguise. Brody's overactive imagination runs wild with the terrifying thought of being sold off cheaply to cover her debt. Wringing her dirty hands nervously, Brody asks if the job is dangerous, which Eccles calmly denies. Eccles reassures the nervous girl, explaining she only needs to report exactly what her clairvoyance reveals. She remembers the fake promises of her orphanage director who warned her to keep her power a secret. Brody casts a cautious glance sideways, carefully weighing her options before making a final decision. Eccles points out she only just finished eating, leaving Brody surprised by how quickly he noticed her hesitation. Eccles reaches into his coat to retrieve something else, presenting it to the young girl. Brody's eyes light up with joy as she receives a fresh paper bag packed full of warm bread. Eccles silently wonders if her small, starved body can even handle consuming so much food at once. Confused by his mutterings about efficiency, Brody is simply told to focus on eating her warm bread. Brody reflects that he must not be a bad person, especially since he actually feeds her well. With a giant gulp, Brody happily swallows her food under his watchful, calm gaze. Her stomach finally full, Brody beams with a radiant, satisfied smile for the first time in days. A luxurious horse-drawn carriage pulls up outside the magnificent gates of a grand white mansion. A loyal servant bows deeply to welcome Lord Eichelus back to his vast opulent estate. Lord Eichelus steps out of the carriage, pausing to look back at the young red-haired girl inside. Lord Eichelus instructs his dark-haired servant Gemville to assist the small girl in exiting the carriage safely. Brody struggles to descend the carriage steps due to her short legs. Gemville suggests making her a temporary rookie after Brody calls the lord her boss. "I understand the task. Please provide the text for me to read back at a faster speed." Gemville turns back to assist the hesitant girl as she prepares to exit the carriage. As Brody steps down, her worn-out shoe slips completely off her small foot. With a quick thud, her lost shoe rolls away and stops right before the Lord. Lord Eichelus steps forward, his polished black dress shoe landing directly on her discarded shoe. A tragic toll rings in Brody's head as she stares at her crushed shoe. Brody stands frozen in shock, her eyes wide with complete disbelief at the tragedy. The devastated young girl screams in pure agony over the sudden loss of her shoe. Brody angrily demands to know what he is doing, while Lord Eichelus wonders if that was even a shoe. Brody huffs in frustration, holding her ruined shoe while glaring at the Lord. Lord Eichelus looks visibly awkward, realizing his mistake under her intense, teary gaze. Gemville is appalled by her bold attitude toward his master, but Lord Eichelus quietly calls his name. Lord Eichelus commands Gemville to take off his own shoes and give them to Brody. Gemville is completely bewildered by the absurd order, but Lord Eichelus repeats his demand. A pair of sleek, polished leather dress shoes are presented as her unexpected replacement. Brody stands awkwardly in the massive adult shoes, looking incredibly tiny and confused. Brody addresses the assistant as Mr., catching him off guard and causing him to gasp. Gemville grumpily tells her she can keep them as a rookie, while Brody happily thanks him. The trio walks toward the estate, with the barefoot servant grumbling behind the others. Brody gasps in absolute awe as she catches sight of the grand estate. The vast, impressive guild headquarters looms ahead, renowned for its massive workforce and high capability. Brody marvels at the luxurious, polished floors, plush carpets, and massive stone pillars inside. Walking through the grand hallway, the young girl is utterly mesmerized by her glamorous surroundings. Brody gazes at a glowing, majestic marble statue, completely amazed by its incredible beauty. Brody asks if this mansion truly belongs to her boss, and Lord Eichelus dryly confirms it. Overwhelmed by physical exhaustion, Brody rubs her eyes as she tries to walk. Gemville reaches his hands down toward the tired girl to offer some assistance. Gemville sweeps Brody up into his arms, easily carrying her small, tired body. Gemville offers to carry her, bringing a bright, grateful smile to the young girl's face. Gemville smiles warmly as Brody cheerfully thanks him for the kind gesture. A loud creak echoes as Lord Ickles opens a large set of ornate wooden doors. The group walks down a grand sunlit marble corridor with Lord Ickles leading the way. Brody wonders if they are approaching a tiny room or a giant box. Brody remains highly confused as she stares at a set of strange double doors. Brody asks what the strange mechanism is, causing Lord Ickles to let out a deep sigh. Lord Ickles grimly reflects on a troublesome client, cursing a crazy old man's memory. Brody tilts her head in utter confusion, wondering what is bothering the Lord. Lord Ickles recalls an elderly gentleman begging the guild to accept a very special request. The target of the request was a wealthy, self-made noble who had been constantly exploited. Lord Ickles initially complained about the troublesome job, but the elder insisted cost was no issue. The elder promised to leave his entire fortune to Lord Ickles upon successful completion. Intrigued by the massive offer, Lord Ickles inquired about the exact size of the fortune. The old man offered an astounding starting sum of 1 billion pure gold coins. Hearing the mind-boggling amount, the smiling lord immediately agreed to hear the elder's story. Legendary currency was made of pure gold, possessing 10 times the standard value. The massive payout required intense effort, causing immense suffering for the entire guild. The guild workers labored relentlessly on the estate liquidation, ledger auditing, and spreading rumors. Though the guild nearly worked themselves to death, the elderly client unfortunately passed away first. A servant presents the late Viscount's last will to Lord Ickles, explaining its unexpected arrival just before the commission fee was due. The Viscount's letter expresses gratitude and promises a reward far exceeding the initial commission fee. The testament reveals that one door contains his massive fortune, while the other incinerates it. The deceased client's message challenges Lord Ickles to a single high-stakes guess to win his entire estate. The notorious godmother of safecracking flees in terror, leaving a note admitting her complete defeat. Greed disrupts coordination with the Magic Tower, and even the Empire's top fortune teller gives up. Facing absolute frustration, Lord Ickles deeply sighs and curses the troublesome deceased elderly client. Brody silently observes her boss, wondering why he suddenly looks incredibly angry and pissed off. Lord Ickles gently pats Brody on the head, calling out to get her attention. Lord Ickles addresses Brody by name, drawing her attention to the double doors ahead of them. Lord Ickles promises Brody a lifetime of wealth if she successfully identifies the safe's door. Brody excitedly asks if the life-changing reward is truly that simple, and Lord Ickles confirms it. Brody confidently marches forward to choose, leaving Lord Ickles questioning his own decision. Jumville silently doubts relying on a tiny child whose height barely reaches up to their waists. Jemville suggests hiring the Magic Tower again, but Lord Ickles dryly challenges him to open it himself. An awkward, solemn silence quickly falls over the two men as they face the high stakes. Lord Ickles admits he would have guessed randomly anyway, wishing to get the annoying matter resolved. Lord Ickles tells Brody to take her time and direct any of her needs to Jumbo. Jumbo reacts with complete annoyance and disbelief at being designated as the young girl's assistant. Brody immediately grabs the right door handle, causing Jumbo to yell in sudden, frantic panic. Jumbo reacts in utter shock, unable to believe that Brody has already made her final decision. Brody explains that she can see the exact safe, papers, and box they are looking for. Brody happily nods, reassuring a skeptical Lord Ickles that she is completely sure of her choice. Jumbo frets over the risk of fire, but Lord Ickles resolves to bury the safe on the client's grave if it fails. Lord Ickles turns the handle, daring the deceased client to haunt him if the choice is wrong. The heavy door creaks open, revealing a brilliant and blinding golden glow from within the room. Jemville stands completely frozen and barefoot down the hallway, utterly stunned by the sudden outcome. Sweating in disbelief, Jemville feels as though they have just hit a massive, impossible jackpot. Brody cheers in pure joy as the open room reveals piles of sparkling treasure and gold. The crew remains in complete shock that a small child easily bypassed a puzzle they spent months on. Brody's eyes widen in surprise as Lord Ickles presents her with a long, rolled-up pouch. Brody holds her reward and proudly asks Lord Ickles if she did a good job. Lord Ickles lets out a highly satisfied smirk as he reviews the valuable documents they secured. Lord Ickles notes her immense usefulness under her radiant, joyful smile. Brody asks if her debt for the bread is cleared, but Lord Ickles unexpectedly denies it. Lord Ickles instructs Jemville to bring a child-sized pouch, leaving Brody thoroughly confused. A mischievous tiny purple devil floats across the screen, signaling impending trouble. Terrified, Brody worries why her boss is reacting this way despite her doing a great job. Brody trembles in fear, dreading that the notorious guild is preparing to eliminate her. Lord Ickles drops the massive, child-sized pouch directly onto Brody's head, startling her. Lord Eichless tells Brody to pack whatever she wants, making her realize he is not selling her. A dark shadow falls over Brody's face as she hesitates, staring down at the floor. Brody quietly refuses to take the gold, fearing her cruel orphanage director will just steal it all anyway. Gemville sternly tells her to accept the rare grace and kindness bestowed by Lord Eichless. With a quick thud, her oversized shoes step directly onto the empty pouch. Gemville is appalled by her stubborn behavior and complete lack of manners toward his master. Lord Eichless suddenly bursts into amused laughter, completely catching his assistant off guard. Brody stands awkwardly in the giant boots, looking incredibly tiny and nervous. Lord Eichless calls her name, deciding to let the matter go. Lord Eichless kneels down to her eye level, gently asking what she would prefer to receive instead. Gemville looks back in surprise as a red-haired companion greets him, noting that everyone has assembled. The smiling red-haired young man explains that Lord Achizian returned from his outing a short while ago. Gemville reacts with distress as his companion compares Lord Achizian's new recruit to a tiny red squirrel. Gemville instructs his companion to wait and greet the new recruit at a later time. The men in the office react with curiosity upon learning about Lord Achizian's newly selected recruit. An echoing question about whether Roddy is truly being adopted triggers a nostalgic sunlit memory. In a flashback, Jeno questions the sudden adoption news while Roddy cheerfully clarifies her departure. Young Jeno stares with sad, wide eyes, finding Rowdy's sudden departure incredibly difficult to accept. Jeno confesses his fear of being left entirely alone while their sick companion Barry is hospitalized. Roddy hands a paper bag filled with warm bread to Jeno as a parting gift. Brody instructs Jeno to keep the food a secret from the other children at the orphanage. Rhodey confidently declares her grand ambition to work hard and become incredibly rich. Rhodey promises to return and take her friends with her once she makes her fortune. Child's drawing depicts Roddy's dream of providing her friends with endless food and a home. Jeno tearfully questions how Roddy could possibly accomplish such a difficult task on her own. Roddy gently bids Jeno farewell as a warm, comforting light surrounds their parting moment. Roddy wraps Jeno in a tight hug, promising that they will all meet again someday. Tears stream down young Jeno's face as he asks for reassurance of their eventual reunion. Roddy confidently agrees while Lord Achizian is seen outside, roughly handling the protesting orphanage director. Jeno and Roddy share a final, bittersweet farewell through the glass window of the building. Lord Achizian calmly smokes his cigar while Gemville drags the loudly protesting director away. With a rhythmic rattle, the carriage travels forward, transitioning the scene back to the present. Rhodey politely thanks Lord Achizian for confronting and scolding the cruel director on her behalf. Lord Achizian dismisses her gratitude, coolly stating that dealing with the director was the deal. Gemville admits his initial doubts about their success, suddenly startling Rowdy with his loud voice. Rhodey beams with joy, expressing her absolute delight that she put her trust in him. Lord Achizian sits in pensive silence, resting his chin on his hand with a serious expression. Jeno waves alongside their recovered friend Barry, while Rhodey asserts she has no regrets. As the carriage wheels spin, Roddy confidently reaffirms her decision to follow her new boss. Roddy eagerly reminds Lord Achizian of his promise to let her bring her friends along later. Gemville humorously points out that Rhodey is drooling, catching the young girl completely off guard. Lord Achizian suggests Roddy needs a wash first, causing her to worry if she smells. Rowdy huffs in adorable annoyance when Lord Achizian bluntly points out how dirty she looks. Lord Achizian instructs Gemville to provide for Rhodey, declaring she will live with them. A gentle hand pats Rowdy on the head, offering a surprising moment of warm comfort. Roddy looks up in wonder as Lord Achizian smiles down kindly at her. Lord Achizian welcomes Rhodey to Chales as Gemville gently guides her toward the grand entrance. Roddy scratches her head in utter confusion, finding Lord Achizian's contrasting behavior incredibly strange. News spreads through the office that Lord Achizian has personally chosen a brand new recruit. The men argue in disbelief over rumors that the new recruit is incredibly tiny. Gemville confirms the bizarre rumors, leaving the others wondering how the child charmed their lord. The three companions continue their lively discussion regarding the mysterious and tiny new recruit. A sudden, frantic shout echoes as someone demands to know why they were just informed. The long-haired blonde man enthusiastically suggests they go see the adorable new recruit immediately. The excited man shouts back a promise to Padre to clean up his mess later. With a steady scratch of his pen, Padre continues writing diligently at his desk. Padre sits silently at his cluttered desk, surrounded by piles of discarded, crumpled paperwork. Padre snaps his pen and bursts into furious rage over his colleague's lack of responsibility. The three men gush over how adorable Roddy looks in her giant, oversized clean shirt. Roddy stands completely bewildered by the crowd of strange, gushing men surrounding her. Achizian warmly greets the young girl and introduces himself as her new companion. Ixion introduces his two companions, the serious Horace and the cheerfully waving Halo. When Ixion asks about her parents, Brody calmly explains that she does not have any. An angry shout erupts, reprimanding the red-haired man for his incredibly tactless question. Brody clarifies that she came from an orphanage, leaving Ixion frantically hoping she only meant they were away. A sudden sharp thud echoes as Horace violently punishes Ixion for his thoughtless mistake. Horace apologizes to the young girl on behalf of his despondent, thoughtless companion. Horace asks Brody if she is today's new recruit, while Halo playfully tells him to behave. Halo extends a welcoming hand, though Brody silently notes how strange these people seem. Placing her tiny hand in his, Brody decides that they do not seem like bad people. Brody introduces herself, and Halo warmly praises her cool name and tiny hands. They ask her age and her purpose in Chales, learning she is only 7 years old. Brody looks up in quiet surprise, processing their many curious questions. Halo whispers to Horace in disbelief, pointing out that she is far too young. A sudden, stern voice from behind asks what they are doing, interrupting their whispering. Gamble bluntly hands Brody clean clothes and shoes, instructing her to change. Brody beams with joy and politely thanks him for the nice clothes and shoes. Horace protests that they are not a daycare, while Gamble wonders if she truly cracked the safe. Gamble firmly reminds them that they know the rules and Chales only values raw skill. Halo teasingly suggests that even the stern Gamble has gone soft due to her cuteness. The scene shifts to the quiet room at night as a restless shifting sound echoes. Brody tosses and turns in bed, tears welling as she clutches her painful stomach. Alone in the massive bed, Brody trembles as the severe stomachache worsens. Brody recalls her initial awe upon seeing the massive room she was assigned. She thanks Gamble, who dryly reminds her that he was only following orders. Gamble sternly warns her to fend for herself, but she confidently tells him not to worry. Brody proudly declares that she is a complete professional at taking care of herself. Gamble inwardly laments that his new charge has fallen sick on her very first day. Brody realizes that stuffing herself after years of orphanage food insecurity completely wrecked her stomach. Tears stream down her face as she deeply regrets not stopping herself from eating sooner. Unable to bear the agonizing pain, she slips out of bed to search for medicine. With a creak of the door, Brody weakly calls out into the dark hallway. Her fragile voice echoes down the long, empty, and dimly lit corridor. Stumbling forward, Brody grows increasingly dizzy as a burning fever begins to take over. With a dizzying spin, her vision blurs and tears well up as her strength fades. Brody feels herself collapsing to the floor as a strange dark energy suddenly envelops her. Brody floats mysteriously in midair as a strange figure suddenly stands before her. The mysterious black-haired boy looks down at her floating form with mild curiosity. Brody notes the boy's striking combination of black hair and vibrant red eyes. She realizes she has never encountered anyone with such a striking, unusual appearance. Brody wonders if she is dreaming as Gamble frantically rushes down the corridor. Gamble bows respectfully to Lord Lexiad, who calmly explains he is just looking around. Lexiad points out that the girl is crying in pain, startling Gamble. Lexian coldly criticizes the estate's sloppy management for letting a sick child wander unsupervised. Sweat-inducing panic strikes Gamble as he desperately explains she was only brought in today. Lexiad sternly commands Gamble to stop explaining and summon a doctor immediately. Gamble immediately obeys, rushing off to carry out the young lord's command. Gamble scrambles away, leaving Lexiad alone with the floating, feverish young girl. Lexiad silently gazes down at Brody as she continues to struggle with her fever. Seeking comfort, Brody weakly reaches out and tightly grasps Lexiad's hand. The mysterious, black-haired boy with vibrant red eyes quietly gazes down, lost in thought. A small speech bubble breaks the silence as he notes the soft, squishy feeling of her hand. Their hands remain gently clasped together in the dimly lit room. Brody lets out a soft, painful whimper as she rests under the warm covers. Brody wakes up completely disoriented, finding Jemble sitting patiently on a chair beside her bed. Brody cheerfully calls him Mister, prompting Jemble to dryly clarify his name. Gemble stands up from his chair as Brody sits up, looking much better. Jemble asks if her stomach is still causing her any trouble. Brody happily assures him that the pain has completely disappeared. Jemble humorously presses his massive hand over her face, completely blocking her view. Jemble reflects on the strict nature of the guild, recalling his warning about no special treatment. Jemble gently pats Brody's head, much to her surprise and delight. Gemble smiles warmly at the girl, relieved that her fever is finally broken. Brody promises to stop being a nuisance, though she still stubbornly calls him Mister. Gemble sighs inwardly, feeling a mixture of fondness and exhaustion from her stubbornness. Gimble advises her to rest properly as he prepares to leave her. Brody suddenly calls out to stop him just as he reaches the door. Brody eagerly asks about the black-haired boy who helped her the night before. Gimble gruffly refuses to tell her, advising her to find the boy herself. Brody pouts in adorable annoyance at Gimble's stubborn refusal to help. Brody mutters complaints about Gimble as she begins exploring the massive estate. She pauses in awe, realizing the endless corridors of the manor are incredibly vast. Fearing she will get lost, Brody begins searching her pockets for a solution. She pulls out her stashed bread, deciding to use breadcrumbs to leave a clear trail. Humming happily, Brody walks down the grand hallway while dropping tiny breadcrumbs behind her. A sudden hand reaches down from the shadows to pick up one of her crumbs. Sensing something behind her, Brody stops in her tracks and turns around. Brody is surprised to find the mysterious black-haired boy standing right behind her. Recognizing his black hair, she eagerly takes a step forward to greet him. She happily runs over and grabs his hand, thanking him warmly for helping her yesterday. As Brody chatters away, the boy quietly recognizes her as the sick child who collapsed. The black-haired boy freezes in surprise as Brody continues to hold onto his hand. Brody tightly squeezes his hand, her face lighting up with genuine gratitude. She innocently asks if he is also a new recruit at the mansion. Brody introduces herself as Lodi and floods him with stories about her orphanage background. The boy looks completely overwhelmed, noting that she isn't listening to a single word. He finds her endless chatter fascinating as he stares deeply into her bright eyes. Brody smiles radiantly, boasting about how the kind boss gave her food and clothes. She walks alongside him, happily praising her new boss with a bright smile. Brody notes that the black-haired boy bears a striking resemblance to her boss. She beams with joy, reiterating how wonderful and kind the boss has been to her. The boy asks if she calls Iklis her boss, leaving her momentarily confused. A helpful diagram displays the guild hierarchy, identifying Iklis as the supreme leader. Brody proudly declares her ambitious dream of saving up 1,000 gold coins. She explains that she needs the fortune to buy a big house for her orphanage friends. Brody then turns the question back to the boy, asking when he joined the guild. The boy privately muses that 1,000 gold coins is a trivial amount he could easily give her. The boy smiles softly and agrees that he joined under similar circumstances, offering his friendship. He gently squeezes her hand back, quietly noting that he joined long before yesterday. The two children stroll down the magnificent dining hall hallway, happily chatting as they go. Brody happily suggests eating together sometime after learning about the delicious food, and Lexiad agrees. Brody is visibly excited, but Lexiad secretly finds her to be a tiny bit troublesome. Lexiad notes that her chatter and puppy-like behavior aren't so bad, but they are suddenly interrupted. Brody turns around in surprise, gasping as she sees who has arrived behind him. The stern, red-eyed leader of the guild, Iklis, looks down at them with crossed arms. Brody happily reaches out to hold his hand, identifying him as her beloved boss. Iklis pats her red hair and kindly asks how her very first day went. Lexiad watches from a distance as Iklis tells Brody to focus on settling in first. Brody happily explains that Lexiad helped her explore the second floor and they became friends. Lexiad stares silently, prompting Iklis to coldly ask what he is staring at. Lexiad teasingly suggests that his uncle has picked up a strange hobby of raising kids. Brody is utterly shocked to learn that her boss is actually Lexiad's uncle. Brody begins comparing the two, noticing their striking features are remarkably similar. She realizes that a shrunken, crumpled version of Iklis would look exactly like Lexiad. Brody sweats in sheer panic as she remembers she talked badly about Iklis earlier. Iklis demands to know why Lexiad keeps crawling back to the estate after being sent home. Lexiad defends himself by pointing out that Iklis told him to come whenever he wanted. Confused by the tension, Brody innocently asks if the two are actually family. Iklis coldly denies it while Lexiad confidently insists that they are indeed family. Iklis turns his head away, flatly refusing to acknowledge the relation. Lexiad playfully tells Brody that his uncle hates him, leaving Iklis thoroughly annoyed. Brody scolds Iklis for his harsh attitude, warning him that Lexiad will be sad. Iklis pokes Brody's forehead, asking whose side she is supposed to be taking. Brody dramatically clings to Iklis, insisting that family members should never fight. Iklis remains silent, looking down at Brody with a quiet, thoughtful expression. Lexiad smugly asks if Iklis heard her, while Brody pouts in adorable irritation. A blonde-haired man approaches, respectfully addressing Iklis as Lord Iklis. The blonde-haired man politely explains he arrived immediately upon being summoned. Iklis hands Brody over to the blonde-haired man, instructing him to look after her. Held upside down, Brody is startled by the sudden appearance of a new person. The blonde-haired man smiles warmly as Iklis designates her as his new responsibility. Iklis walks away, wishing his troublesome nephew would at least look at him. Lexiad promises to tell Brody the rest later, asking if they can meet again. Brody anxiously whispers to Lexiad, wondering if they can still be friends despite her comments. Lexiad smiles, placing a finger to his lips to keep today's conversation a secret. Brody waves a cheerful farewell, calling out to Lexiad as he prepares to leave. Later, in a private room, Iklis instructs the staff to prepare a carriage for Lexiad. Lexiad asks if he should stay, but Eichlus bluntly tells him to go home. Lexiad warns his uncle that their grandfather is investigating him after a recent attack. Lexiad explains he got rid of an informant to protect Eichlus from their grandfather's reach. Lexiad gazes up with a dark smile, seeking approval from his silent uncle. Memory highlights Lexiad as the tragic half-brother's child, Catherine's sole legacy. A dark family portrait marks the deceased members of House Hickerman with red crosses. A chilling abstract panel recalls a high-profile kidnapping that struck the family years ago. Eichlus remembers his desperate half-brother begging him in tears to save his son. A quiet sigh escapes as the memory shifts to young Lexiad tied up in captivity. Eichlus recalls the dark moment he first stood before the kidnapped child with a drawn sword. Back in the present, Lexiad eagerly asks his uncle why he won't praise him. Eichlus turns away, bitterly recalling that the day he rescued his nephew was also the day his brother died. Eichlus clenches his fist, torn between protecting the boy and being dragged back into the family drama. Eichlus clenches his fist as a surge of dark energy crackles before him. Eichlus reflects on the terrifying power Lexiad acquired following his kidnapping incident. Lexiad cheerfully asks for praise, despite displaying a chilling cruelty unusual for a 10-year-old child. Recalling his late brother's plea to care for Lexiad, a conflicted Eichlus wonders what would happen if he refused. Lexiad decides he will choose his own reward, catching Eichlus completely off guard. Lexiad flashes a sinister grin as dark purple shadows swirl ominously around him. Lexiad asks which room the newly arrived child is currently staying in. Lexiad demands to know the location of the young girl's room. When Eichlus questions his motives, Lexiad smoothly asks if there is a spare room nearby. Lexiad offers to vacate the second floor, but Eichlus firmly reiterates that no rooms are available. Lexiad mockingly threatens to tell Brody to keep the adjacent room vacant as he leaves. Eichlus deeply sighs, wondering when his troublesome nephew will finally mature. The polite, blonde-haired Jean Jane introduces himself to a surprised Brody. Brody cheerfully introduces herself, and Jean respectfully acknowledges her as Lady Brody. Brody excitedly declares her ambitious goal of growing up quickly to turn 8 years old. Jean smiles warmly at the small girl, encouragingly praising her strong determination. Jean brings Brody to the General Affairs office to register her information before they proceed. Jean knocks and announces his arrival, receiving a prompt invitation to enter. Brody looks around in wide-eyed wonder as she steps into the massive room. The sprawling high-ceilinged room is filled with grand bookshelves and elegant decorations. Brody curiously wanders around the luxurious office, taking in her impressive new surroundings. The silver-haired man at the desk murmurs to himself, wondering what instructions Eichlus left. The silver-haired man notes Jean's short appearance, mistaking Brody's low height for him. A sudden realization hits the silver-haired officer when he sees Jean standing at full height. The officer realizes she is the rumored newcomer under Jean's care. The officer slides over the official registration documents and a small key. Jean receives the packet containing Brody's newly registered official guild documents. Brody curiously holds her new personal key and the official registration packet close. The officer explains that she can use her key to access her own private safe. Brody asks about the safe, and Jean explains she can store her valued possessions inside. Jean offers Brody a pen to write, causing her to hesitate nervously. Brody timidly confesses that she does not know how to read or write. The officer quickly apologizes for his oversight, leaving Brody blushing in sheer embarrassment. The silver-haired officer calls out to Jean, a serious expression crossing his face. The officer suggests hiring an imperial language tutor to help Brody learn her letters first. Brody looks up at Jean with wide, star-filled eyes, completely captivated by the proposal. Brody looks forward with nervous anticipation as mysterious shadows loom behind her. A hot-headed, red-haired man grabs Horace by the collar, loudly demanding they settle their dispute. As the two colleagues bicker outside, the officer sighs over their unprofessional behavior while Jean apologizes. Jean blankly explains he couldn't escape because Horace had slung him over his shoulder. The officer mentally notes that while Jean is highly competent, he has a peculiar personality. The officer disqualifies the bickering pair from teaching Brody, prompting loud protests from both men. The officer flatly rejects their protests, stating their bad influence would only corrupt Brody's pure soul. The officer laments Gamble's absence before asking Brody how much money she received from Eichlus. The red-haired man insists she was shortchanged, telling her to demand far more from Eichlus. When the red-haired man claims Eichlus is ripping her off, Brody is deeply scandalized. Brody wonders if she is being swindled, prompting the officer to suggest using softer language. A sudden click from the door interrupts their conversation, drawing everyone's immediate attention. A newcomer steps inside, agreeing with Brody's blunt wording to the surprise of the room. The red-haired man turns in annoyance, asking why his blonde companion keeps nudging his elbow. The red-haired man, Echion, nervously reflects on how addressing Eichlus as master fits perfectly. Eichlus sternly demands to know if his colleagues find the situation amusing. Ikizian breaks into a nervous sweat, smiling awkwardly under Iklis's intense gaze. Ikishan frantically laughs off his previous comments, claiming he has recently taken up eating dog food as a bizarre hobby. Sweat dripping down his face, Ikizian begs for mercy, jokingly offering to raise Brody to replace him if Iklis's lifespan is running short. Brody innocently asks her boss where Lexiad went, and Iklis flatly tells her he already left. Brody enthusiastically declares that Lexiad is nice, but Iklis dismisses her claim immediately. Brody happily announces her decision to learn how to read, and Iklis encourages her to study hard. Brody nervously calls out to her boss, but Iklis tells her to speak quickly because he is busy. Brody sheepishly asks if Iklis will pat her head again once she masters her letters, catching him completely off guard. Brody gently tugs his sleeve, and a soft pat sounds as Iklis hesitantly rests his hand on her red head. The three onlookers swoon in delight, collectively finding her display of innocence completely adorable. A gentle smile creeps onto Iklis's stern face as he looks down at her. Brody enthusiastically promises to work hard, while Ikizian's sweat drops and apologizes to Iklis in the foreground. The door shuts with a quiet click as Iklis leaves the paperwork in Padrid's capable hands. His slow footsteps echo down the quiet, sunlit corridor as he walks away alone. Iklis chuckles to himself, amused by her boldness and deciding she is strong enough to survive here. Brody stares at her own name written on a sheet of paper, wondering if that is how it is spelled. Ikizian clacks excitedly, praising the special recruit for her cleverness while Padrid watches quietly. The blonde man begins writing out Iklis's full name, leaving Ikizian completely shocked. The two men bicker in chibi style, quickly dropping the subject before Brody notices. Holding her quill confidently, Brody insists that she can write the name herself. The text on the page beautifully spells out Iklis Chales, and the blonde tutor invites her to try reading it. Brody proudly shouts out Iklis Chales, delighting Ikizian, who points encouragingly at the paper. Ikizian gasps in pure awe, declaring that the red-haired newcomer is an absolute genius. The tan blonde-haired man notes that she will master the imperial language in a few months, making Brody giggle happily. The tan blonde-haired man curiously asks if she can see hidden objects, and she confidently confirms it. The scene shifts with a cute chibi sea creature panel as they prepare to test her unique ability. A sudden click sounds as Padrid opens a door holding a dark case. Padrid sternly tells the men to stop pestering Brody and continue with her actual lesson. Kyoshin ignores him, playfully urging Brody to reveal what is inside the dark case. Brody's brilliant blue eyes glitter with mysterious light as they reflect a ring of keys and glowing blue stones. Brody asks Padrid if she can check the box, and he readily grants her permission. Box lid opens with a soft slide, and Ikizian is stunned to find a ring of keys and magic stones. Brody tilts her head in curiosity, innocently asking what a magic stone actually is. Ikizian points out her complete innocence regarding magic stones, while Padrid files paperwork behind them. Brody's stomach suddenly lets out a loud rumble, and she sheepishly asks Ikizian if she can get food. Ikizian asks if she knows the way, and Brody happily recalls Venda guiding her there this morning. Brody asks if she can resume learning after eating, and Ikizian enthusiastically agrees. Brody happily repeats Ikizian's name, catching him off guard. Brody declares her desire to learn everyone's names, including Padrid, Janan, Venda, Horace, and Jembul. The door closes with a gentle click as Ikizian tells her to eat slowly. Padrid stands quietly by the door, prompting Ikizian to address him directly. Ikizian wonders if he should quickly get married to have a daughter as adorable as Brody. Brody dashes down the hallway with light, quick steps, hoping for lots of delicious food. A loud thud echoes as Brody violently collides with a red-haired woman walking by. The red-haired woman glares down in irritation, demanding that Brody watch where she is going. Brody pouts angrily on the floor, rubbing her sore head in frustration. Dark purple mist suddenly rises with a soft whoosh as someone addresses her as Rowdy. Brody is swept up into the air by a swirl of dark shadows, leaving her completely startled. Brody exclaims in delight as she sets her eyes on the delicious feast. Brody asks if the massive feast is too much food for just the two of them. Lexiad reasons that excess food is better, then asks why Brody was lying on the floor earlier. Brody explains she fell after bumping into a lady, sparking Lexiad's curiosity. Lexiad recalls the red-haired woman in deep thought before Brody asks him if he wants to eat. Brody eagerly offers him a bite of food, thrusting the fork in front of him. Brody asks why he is not eating, prompting Lexiad to snap out of his thoughts. Brody asks if Lexiad visited to see his uncle again, catching him off guard. Lexiad surprises Brody by revealing he actually came to the guild to see her today. Brody pouts about his sudden departure yesterday, making Lexiad wonder if she was upset. Lexiad admits his limits, explaining he did not expect her to return to the guild so soon. Lexiad promises to say goodbye next time, which Brody happily accepts as they continue eating. Brody stops chewing with a puzzled look, prompting Lexiad to ask what is wrong. Lexiad asks when she first discovered her ability, and Brody admits she cannot remember exactly. Brody recalls pointing out hidden candies in her old headmaster's pocket when he lied to her. The headmaster grew suspicious and began questioning her intensely about how she knew the candies were there. Under the headmaster's intense pressure, young Brody realized her unique visual ability was far from normal. Lexia asks if she answered the headmaster's questions, and Brody innocently confirms that she did. Lexiad asks if others knew, and Brody reveals some teachers found out but are no longer around. Brody explains how the headmaster warned her to hide her powers, calling her strange and bad. Lexiad wipes her mouth, realizing she secretly used her ability until Iklas discovered and saved her. Brody boasts about her boss scolding the headmaster, which Lexiad notes is his uncle's specialty. Brody asks Lexiad if anyone scolded him for using his dark shadow magic as extra hands. Lexiad demonstrates his shadow magic, explaining that people naturally avoid him, so it is never an issue. Lexiad clarifies that the shadows are not strictly hands, though the description is accurate enough. Lexiad explains his shadows serve as weapons or shields, leading Brody to ask if it tires him out. Lexiad shares that hunger makes his vision spin, while Brody considers herself lucky to just feel hungry. Lexiad thanks her for answering his questions, promising to ask her more during their next meeting. Having finished their meal, Lexiad asks Brody what she would like to do next. Brody eagerly reveals her long-held desire to explore the first floor of the guild building. Looking over the balcony, Brody excitedly observes the bustling activity of the other guild members downstairs. Lexiad mentions a magical elevator, but Brody declines, preferring the stairs because the magic feels unsettling. Brody changes her mind, deciding she should try the magical device again out of playful curiosity. Brody marvels in absolute wonder as she finally steps onto the bustling first floor of the guild. Brody points out a grand balcony, and Lexiad explains it is the banquet hall used for parties. Brody asks if they serve meat at parties, prompting Lexiad to offer to arrange one for her. Lexiad promises to host a party this weekend, filling Brody with pure excitement as she thanks him. Brody spots the red-haired woman she collided with earlier and alerts Lexiad to her presence. Lexiad asks for details, triggering Brody's unique visual ability to activate as she focuses her gaze. Through her vision, Brody reveals the woman is concealing numerous sharp needles and small knives under her clothes. Lexiad questions the weapons, but Brody rationalizes that other members also carry weapons like knives. Brody notes that their boss also carries a concealed knife, which Lexiad attributes to earning people's grudges. Brody defensively argues that their boss is not a bad person, prompting Lexiad to ask why she thinks so. Brody suddenly shifts her attention, pointing out another large door down the hall. Brody asks where the large door leads, and Lexiad explains it connects to another building. Lexiad explains the building is called the West Wing and asks if she wants to visit. Brody asks if it is far, and Lexiad reassures her they only need to cross a garden. Lexiad suddenly remembers something important, pausing their conversation to address Brody. Lexiad flashes a warm, friendly smile at Brody as they prepare for their next destination. Lexia hints that she will find something she really likes over in the West Wing. Bright sunlit garden blooms with vibrant red roses near a grand white building. Jemville walks down the quiet garden pathway, carrying a thick stack of documents. Jemville sighs with exhaustion from being outdoors, but a sudden cheerful voice catches his attention. Jemville watches from a distance as Brody and Lexiad stand together marveling at a massive fountain. Brody happily expresses her delight to Lexiad, while Jemville notes their growing closeness. Jemville contemplates whether it is truly safe to leave the two young ones together alone. A dark shadow looms as Jemville recalls Lexiad's unmatched power, absolute loyalty, and dangerous impulsiveness. Blood-red stains paint a dark scene, highlighting the unpredictable, immature emotional control of the young boy. An ominous crimson mist reflects the volatile nature hidden behind his calm demeanor. Jemville reasons that if Lord Iklas wanted them separated, he would have intervened by now. Jemville walks forward, wondering if their shared status as uniquely gifted individuals is why they are allowed together. Brody suddenly turns around, her bright eyes widening in pleasant surprise as she spots him. Brody beams with an adorable wide smile upon seeing her familiar companion. Running over enthusiastically, Brody grabs his sleeve to get his attention. Brody happily shows off her lovely new dress, proudly mentioning that Venda dressed her up. Brody confidently boasts about smelling nice now, and Jemville patiently listens to her innocent chatter. Jemville's sweat drops in silence, completely baffled by her random logic and innocent bragging. Jemville wonders if he should just head back inside, only to be called back by Lexiad. Lexiad approaches them, pointing out that the second floor seems to have been neglected during cleaning. Lexiad smiles subtly as he mentions finding a dirty spot with stray red hair on the floor. Jemville grows serious upon hearing this, well aware of their boss's absolute hatred for untidiness. Jemville politely vows to clean the area spotlessly, while Brody defensively insists the floor is perfectly clean. Lexiad insists there was dust in the corner, prompting Jemville to acknowledge the correction. Brody enthusiastically boasts about her own cleaning skills, catching Lexiad completely off guard. Channeling the energy of a determined squirrel, Brody declares her desire to earn money through hard work. Both boys gently reject her offer, leaving Brody looking adorably dejected as she asks to help. Jemville reminds her of her language lessons, and Lexiad encourages her to focus on studying instead. Brody sweetly offers her assistance anyway, making sure Jemville knows she is ready to help. Jemville flashes a warm, rare smile as Brody happily bids him farewell. Returning indoors, Brody spots her boss at the bottom of the grand staircase and calls out excitedly. Icklus turns his head, his stoic gaze softening slightly as he looks back at her. Brody quickly dashes toward him, curiously questioning why he is just standing there in silence. Icklus silently compares her excited greeting to a loyal puppy eagerly welcoming its owner back home. As Brody and Lexiad hold hands as friends, Icklus dryly questions Lexiad's sudden interest in making friends. Brody chides her boss for being unfriendly, while Lexiad casually notes that his uncle is always grumpy. Icklus frowns in irritation, bluntly asking his nephew when he plans on going home. Lexiad smugly claims the guild is his home, leaving Icklus exasperated by his persistent disobedience. Icklus sighs and delivers the surprising news that the abusive orphanage director has finally been replaced. Brody stands frozen in shock as Icklus gently suggests moving to a more private room. Inside his office, Icklus explains how the former director was caught embezzling a massive sum of money. Icklus reveals he bought the orphanage to ensure her friends are safe, proving he kept his promise. Brody silently contrasts her boss's swift, effortless rescue with the empty promises of others in her past. Brody's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as Icklus casually offers 2 brutal fates for her former tormentor. Brody is left completely speechless, sweat dripping down her face at the dark, chilling suggestion. Exhaling a puff of smoke, Icklus notices her sudden tension and asks if she is frightened. Icklus backtracks slightly upon seeing her fear, preparing to make the final decision himself. Icklus quietly ponders which of the brutal punishments would be the most painful and terrifying. Brody stares up at her towering boss in complete, bewildered silence at his casual brutality. Dark memory reveals a kind teacher pleading with the uncaring director to let sick children see a doctor. The greedy director threatens to fire the teacher, forcing her to carry the sick child alone without aid. A bitter memory of the orphanage highlights the extreme food scarcity and the uncaring director's harsh dismissal. In exchange for valuable gold coins, the children received only a single meager loaf of bread. The director only cared about appearances, cleaning the children solely to impress visiting sponsors. Brody tearfully recalls the immediate abuse she faced after sponsors left, asking Icklus which punishment is worse. Overcome with painful memories, Brody tearfully requests the absolute most painful punishment for her former director. With a calm expression, Icklus accepts her decision and promises to carry out the brutal sentence. The heavy emotional toll of her dark past leaves Brody wiping away her silent tears. Standing silently, Icklus pulls the crying young girl close to offer a rare, comforting embrace. Icklus gazes down at her with a stoic look, silently harboring his own dark thoughts. A silver-haired assistant politely knocks on the office door and enters to deliver his report. The assistant announces that he has prepared everything requested, prompting Icklus to promise he will follow shortly. Shifting his focus to Brody, Icklus inquires if she has successfully learned the Imperial language. Icklus asks her to demonstrate what she has learned during her recent language lessons. Brody proudly presents her written work, but Icklus is completely bewildered by the chaotic scrabbles. Icklus instructs Padra to teach her whatever she wishes, mentioning she should also learn self-defense. Brody is puzzled by the suggestion, questioning if physical self-defense is truly a necessary subject for her. Icklus explains that knowing how to protect herself is vital because no one will defend her here. Icklus coldly states that in their guild, death is seen solely as a consequence of incompetence. The harsh reality of his words sinks in, leaving Brody looking quite nervous and subdued. Focused, intense crimson gaze reveals the depth of his serious warning to the young girl. Icklus holds out a paper and instructs Brody to read the words written on it. The document reveals a list of childish insults directed at Icklus, leaving Brody completely speechless. Brody is shocked, but Icklus points out the specific words that mislabel him and the guild. Brody eagerly points to her own name written on the paper with pure innocent joy. Icklus demands to know what the rest says, while Brody boasts about learning to write first. Exasperated, Icklus orders his guards to bring in whoever taught her such highly inappropriate words. Red-haired boy stands in dejected silence, sporting a large, painful bump on his head. Padre severely lectures the red-haired boy, who groans in pain from his recent physical punishment. The red-haired boy looks nervously toward Brody and the other guild members gathered in the room. Padrid reveals that Eichlus is ready to accept his resignation, prompting the boy to quickly behave. Padrid sighs in deep distress, urging the guild members to behave before they ruin their reputation. Venda casually suggests following his own example, but Padrid snaps that he is the most dangerous. Padrid calls the assembly to order, announcing a major preview of upcoming changes within the guild. Padrid declares a strict ban on swearing, dirty language, and internal violence during the preliminary events. Jean raises his hand to ask a question, seeking clarification on the new guild guidelines. Xishan asks if being attacked is allowed, and Venda replies that outside violence is perfectly acceptable. Jean wonders about hitting Echioshan for being annoying, sending the red-haired boy into a furious panic. Padrid sighs in disappointment, wondering if following simple, basic rules is truly that difficult for them. Padrid laments that their executive team behaves like a collection of the world's most chaotic fools. Padrid appoints the calm and reliable Gemville to supervise and enforce the rules among the members. Padrid assigns Acusion to handle training, ignoring the boy's loud protests about his new responsibilities. Padrid warns that any future misconduct by the recruit will be held entirely against the trainer. Padrid threatens to dock his pay if he teaches bad words again while Venda feeds him. Padrid shifts the workload to let Jean focus on looking after the young girl's basic needs. Padrid emphasizes that despite her mature demeanor, Brody is still just a child who needs guidance. Padrid expresses his gratitude to Gemville, who calmly accepts his extra duties without any complaints. Padrid notes down the responsibilities, confirming that Venda will continue to handle meals and lodging. Padrid manages finances and supplies, leaving Venda wondering if he has been saved for something important. Venda is crushed under a massive heavy weight as Padrid hands down a harsh reality check. Having sorted out the guild's duties, Padrid dismisses everyone so he can report to Lord Eichlus. As the boys walk down the grand hallway, they discuss how the guild has transformed since a new kid joined. Gemville warns that the young girl's powerful broken ability will quickly make her a target for enemies. The young girl remains unaware of her newly elevated status, which draws danger from the guild's many enemies. Venda questions if the guild is safe, and Jean agrees that it remains secure for now. Venda cheerfully concludes that they now simply have an endearing new member to protect. They walk together in high spirits, resolved to raise the young girl properly. Brody surprises Gemville in the hallway late at night, offering him a piece of candy. Brody mentions that Venda gave her the treats and innocently asks him to try one. Under the glowing blue moon, Brody wonders why Gemville is still lingering around the guild. Gemville advises the young girl not to be overly friendly to avoid being taken advantage of. Gemville emphasizes his warning, urging her to set boundaries if she wants to survive long-term. Brody immediately ignores his warning, cheerfully handing him a piece of candy anyway. A warm moment of sweet persistence unfolds as she hugs his leg to make him accept. Gemville realizes that she deemed him an exception to her safety line, touched by her innocent trust. Gemville looks down at her smiling face, wondering if her small and weak appearance is what evokes his protective instincts. Her bright, innocent smile shines warmly in the dim light of the quiet hallway. As Brody sits happily on his lap, Gemville remembers his tense report regarding the captured assassin. Gemville silently reflects on the looming threat of another assassin still hiding somewhere within the guild. Brody questions why she is being watched so closely when Gemville was the one who captured the enemy. Gemville pats her head, dryly telling her that his advice is payment for the candy. Brody is left blinking in confusion as Gemville suddenly vanishes from the hallway. Brody turns to head to bed, but suddenly freezes, her eyes widening in surprise. A sudden whoosh echoes behind her as she looks back down the dark corridor. Brody cautiously calls out Gemville's name, sensing someone hiding among the dark roses. Suspense builds as she calls out again into the eerie silence of the corridor. Brody nervously reassures herself that she isn't afraid of a potential ghost. Determined to succeed and get rich, she resolves to conquer her fears. A chilling flashback recalls the dangerous presence of the enemy assassin lurking nearby. Her heart races as a sudden shadow falls over her in the dark corridor. A towering figure stands before her, sending a jolt of sheer panic through her. Suddenly, a pair of strong hands lifts her off the ground. Brody gasps in relief to find Gemville holding her as he questions why she is still awake. Gemville gently tucks her into her bed, telling her to hurry up and sleep. Brody complains that she isn't sleepy, but Gemville warns her she won't grow taller without rest. Gemville lets out a rare, soft chuckle as she immediately panics over his warning. Gemville bids her a warm goodnight as she peacefully drifts off to sleep. A few days pass, bringing the weekend of Lexiad's highly anticipated evening party. Brody happily admires her beautiful new dress, grateful to leave her old rags behind. Brody warmly thanks Venda for helping her dress up in such beautiful clothes once again. Her boss, Eichlus, enters the room and greets her with his usual playful nickname. Brody puffs out her cheeks in irritation, clearly unhappy with being called a pipsqueak. Brody angrily objects to the nickname, loudly asserting her proper name to her boss. Eichless questions why she addresses Vendor with such polite respect but speaks so casually to him. Brody defends her casual attitude, pointing out his habit of giving her absurd nicknames. Brody attempts to recite a classic saying to justify her behavior, but Eichless dryly corrects her mistake. Eichless continues to tease her with nicknames, prompting her to repeat her name in frustration. Eichless suddenly turns serious, asking if she truly has no memories from before her time at the orphanage. Brody watches in confusion as Eichless quietly slips a bag of treats into his pocket. Curious, she reaches out her hand toward his coat to see what he is hiding. Eichless holds her gaze, gently urging her to try and remember her forgotten past. Eichless reflects on how Lexiad gained his powers after the kidnapping, despite failed tracking efforts. Their past investigations led to dead ends, leaving them with no new information until now. Finding Brody, a mysterious kid with strange powers and no records, changed everything. Brody struggles in vain to reach a tall shelf, prompting Eichless to tease her height. Brody demands the treats, but Eichless refuses until she asks him politely with a please. Brody fumes at Eichless's cruelty while he asks if she really won't eat the sweets. Desperate for the delicious cookies, Brody clasps her hands and begs with a tearful plea. She happily munches on her cookie, completely won over by the sweet treat. Eichless looks down at Brody, asking if it is good, as she happily confirms. Percy enters, while Eichless asks Brody if she's excited for the party or the food. Percy announces the arrival of Lord Lexiad, catching the immediate attention of both Eichless and Brody. A joyous collision occurs as Brody warmly welcomes Lexiad back with a big hug. Eichless asks Percy whether he should leave them be or separate them before they become targets. Percy calmly advises letting them be for now, since all the executives are watching closely. Observing Lexiad's rare, happy smile alongside Brody, they note how genuine his joy seems. Eichless orders Percy to separate the kids immediately at any sign of danger. The grand party is underway as lively chatter and excitement fill the elegant hall. Stepping into the venue, Brody's amazed by the crowd and thinks everyone looks happy. Ekision playfully warns Brody not to drool while she puffs out her cheeks in protest. Lexiad calls out to Brody, catching her attention as she turns to look at him. Holding hands, the two young kids walk together with bright, happy smiles. Their entrance immediately draws shocked, staring gazes from the quieted crowd of party guests. The entire hall falls into an awkward, stunned silence as the kids walk down the carpet. Lexiad wonders why the room suddenly became so quiet while the nearby guests whisper in shock. Ekision asks Brody if she is hungry, while Lexiad offers her a plate of cake. Ekision claps loudly, asking the staring crowd if they have never seen a new employee. Ixion tells everyone to have fun, while Brody senses the weird, tense atmosphere. Looking at the silent, whispering crowd, Brody nervously wonders if these people hate her. Suddenly, two polite young guild members step forward and bow to greet Brody. Deaconess and Mugly cheerfully introduce themselves and report to greet the new recruit. Brody happily introduces herself as Brody, while Mugly promises to remember her name. Doors burst open as a pink-haired lady excitedly calls out for Lord Ekision. Exion reacts with nervous shock as a massive bouquet of red roses is presented to him. The pink-haired lady eagerly presents the flowers, while a sweating Ekision awkwardly avoids her gaze. Exion face palms in deep distress while Brody watches the strange interaction with utter confusion. Brody looks at the beautiful pink-haired lady, curiously wondering about her identity. Brody continues to gaze in wonder, silently questioning who this elegant older sister is. Ekision nervously claims nothing is going on between them, urging Brody not to misunderstand. Serenea objects to his cold boundary, while Exivian states office romance is strictly forbidden. Serenea questions why he avoids the East Wing, but Ekision dryly replies he has no reason to visit. Exision tells Joe to drag the whimpering Serenea away, warning her he won't tolerate this again. Serenea freezes as she remembers a voice offering juice to a daughter, sparking sudden shock. Serenea flees in distress while the blonde Horace sighs that Ekision is acting up again. Serenea wonders if Brody is Ekision's child, but Horace clarifies she is just a new rookie. Serenea is baffled that Lord Ekision would treat a new rookie with such kindness. Ixion boasts about being a handsome dad, and Brody happily thanks her new dad. A narrative note reveals Ikioshin is notorious for enthusiastically playing dad at any moment. Serenea pouts and thinks she could play the mother role, leaving Horace sweating in disbelief. Serenea waves frantically for Ekision, prompting Horace to mentally sigh at the chaos around him. Horace face palms in deep exhaustion, lamenting that not a single sane person works at Chales. Brody lets out a sleepy yawn, clearly exhausted from the long party evening. Horace suggests she go to bed, but Brody stubbornly insists on eating everything first, prompting Horace's sarcastic warning. Brody, Achesian, and Horace turn around in surprise as a sudden presence approaches. Percy, the aide of Ichlas, arrives with a summon, causing Achesian to realize he must temporarily depart. Percy promises a quick return, and Achesian bids him a cheerful, temporary farewell. Percy respectfully acknowledges Horace before heading out to tend to his duties. Horace asks if his prior message was delivered, and Percy confirms it was completed. Horace thoughtfully thanks Percy and kindly offers him some food to enjoy during his shift. Percy expresses his gratitude to Horace as he takes the offered drink. Horace asks Achesian to request overtime pay from Ichlas, and Achesian cheerfully agrees before departing. Horace notices Brody's sudden confusion and curiously asks her what is wrong. Brody cautiously states that something feels unusual, prompting Horace to ask for more details. Brody explains her suspicion regarding the aide, visualizing him attacking Achesian with a deadly dagger. Achesian's expression turns deadly serious under the dim hallway light as he senses danger. Achesian swiftly disarms the attacking assassin with a powerful, well-aimed kick to his hand. Achesian immediately grabs the cornered assassin by the throat, completely cutting off his escape. The dagger clatters to the floor as the choked assassin weakly coughs in pain. The struggling assassin gasps in disbelief, while Achesian mockingly questions how he discovered his disguise. Achesian reveals the assassin's first blunder, assuming Horace would ever request overtime pay over sleeping. Achesian further exposes the imposter's identity, noting his failure to realize Percy is left-handed. Achesian demands to know who sent the assassin, mockingly questioning his worth as a disposable pawn. Achesian sighs at the repetitive attempts, while the struggling assassin lets out a strained groan. Achesian's gaze turns freezing cold as he demands a confession from his captive. Achesian cracks his knuckles with a chilling grin, preparing to extract information by force. Back in the dining hall, Horace asks Brody why she suspected the aide. Brody explains her sharp observations regarding the sword's position, earning Horace's silent praise. Lexiad hands Brody some sweet fruit skewers, warmly telling her to eat up. Horace suddenly proposes a quiz to Brody, catching her by surprise mid-bite. Horace presents his question, asking whether Achesian is currently in danger or not. Brody's eyes widen as a dark, ominous premonition of danger flashes before her mind. Brody and Horace turn around to see Achesian and Gemville finally returning to the hall. Achesian cheerfully announces his return, while Gemville comments on the bustling atmosphere in the hall. Horace welcomes them back, while Gemville notices Brody's tense expression and asks what is wrong. Brody worriedly asks if he was in danger, but Achesian casually claims nothing happened at all. Brody lets out a sigh of relief and admits she was worried, while Achesian pats her head. Gemville notes that Brody seems to have had a good time playing at the party. Gemville teases Brody about her comically stuffed belly, asking just how much she ate. Horace asks why they are late, and Gemville explains they had some joint business to handle together. Brody runs over with a bright smile, eagerly presenting a refreshing drink. Brody happily hands Gemville the ice-cold juice, and he gently thanks her as he accepts it. Brody presents a slice of strawberry cake to Achesian, who happily thanks her for the sweet treat. Gemville drinks the juice while Brody proudly offers to fetch him another cup if needed. Gemville suddenly chokes in severe pain, leaving Brody startled and deeply confused by his reaction. Violent, painful coughs echo through the sudden silence as Gemville struggles to breathe. Blood drips from Gemville's mouth as he clutches his throat, sparking immediate panic around him. The glass cup slips from his hand and shatters into pieces on the floor. Gemville clutches his bleeding chest and collapses to the floor, completely overwhelmed by poison. Brody and Achesian stand completely frozen in sheer horror at this sudden, terrifying tragedy. A gasp of pure horror escapes Brody's lips as the terrible reality sinks in. A desperate, agonizing scream rings out through the hallway as they cry out Gemville's name. Brody and Achesian look down in utter horror at the poisoned, bleeding Gemville on the floor. Horace commands everyone to stay by as he addresses a fellow guild member respectfully. Investigators discover that the poison was concentrated exclusively on the shattered pieces of the glass. Whispers fill the room as Brody and Lexiad walk through the crowd in a tense atmosphere. Suspicious glares and hostile murmurs from the crowd trigger a cold, protective fury within Lexiad. Amid the mounting tension, everyone silently wonders who the true culprit of the poisoning is. A close-up reveals Brody looking completely heartbroken and overwhelmed by the terrifying turn of events. Distant whispers continue to ripple through the grand hall as suspicion spreads among the guests. Horace orders all guests to wait in the East Wing quarters for individual questioning, warning them to stay quiet. Under the shadow of the web, a guild member reluctantly agrees to Horace's strict orders. An angry guest blames Brody for the entire disaster, furious that Gemville was caught in it. The angry guest pushes Brody down, aggressively accusing the crying child of being responsible for the poisoning. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy force tightly wraps around the attacker's neck, choking him in midair. Lexiad furiously chokes the man with his dark powers, while Brody watches in terror and begs him to stop. Brody desperately begs Lexiad to stop, warning him that the man will die if he continues. Lexiad looks back with cold, glowing red eyes, stating that he is punishing them for hurting her. Brody thanks Lexiad for defending her, but pleads with him to let them go before it goes too far. Hearing her plea, Lexiad finally releases his dark grip as the shadowy tendrils dissipate from the man's neck. Ichthyon and Horus watch the escalating chaos with deep exhaustion, lamenting the worsening atmosphere of the hall. As a spider waits on his web, they silently ponder how to handle this delicate situation. A mysterious figure stealthily slips out through the doorway to avoid being noticed by the others. Sneaking away, Brody plans to find evidence in the East Wing while Lexiad is temporarily distracted. Despite intense questioning, investigators fail to find any hidden poison or clues on the suspect's weapons. Brody rushes toward the East Wing, determined to uncover the evidence that she believes she missed earlier. A sudden noise catches Brody's attention, causing her to stop and look in surprise. Brody overhears the suspects complaining about being unjustly locked up and treated like criminals after the party. Brody overhears the suspects whispering and gossiping about her involvement in Gemville's poisoning, leaving her deeply hurt. The suspects callously suggest getting rid of Brody, calling her untrustworthy street trash who doesn't belong. A hostile suspect looms over Brody, bitterly accusing her of overstepping her boundaries as a kid. The man violently grabs Brody, demanding to know why a mere child receives special treatment. Shaking Brody aggressively, the man demands to know who hired her to poison Gemville. The other suspect quickly warns his companion to stay quiet to avoid Lexiad's terrifying wrath. Brody silently looks down with a mixture of sadness and frustration at their cruel accusations. Unable to bear the hostility any longer, Brody turns around and runs away in distress. Memories of Gemville, Lexiad, Bender, and Top Boss flash through Brody's mind as she flees. Brody sadly realizes that the people she cares about are getting hurt simply for being near her. The suspect's cruel remark about her being an insignificant brat continues to echo in her mind. Brody tries to comfort herself, recalling how common false accusations were during her street life. Wiping away her tears, Brody resolves not to cry and vows to find a real solution. Gemville slowly wakes up in a quiet room, his eyes blinking open in confusion. Ixion immediately rushes to Gemville's bedside, asking if he is okay and fully awake. Awakening on his bed, Gemville asks what happened, while Ixion explains he was poisoned and lost consciousness. Horus informs Gemville that the entire guild is in chaos over the attempted poisoning incident. Horus explains that suspects are being detained in the East Wing, leaving Gemville to ask about Brody. Gemville visualizes Brody offering him the poisoned drink, realizing she is caught in a terrible trap. Clutching his bedsheet, Gemville asks what Iklis said, learning that Brody remains a primary suspect. Ixion and Horus discuss the situation, agreeing that they cannot let the culprit get away with this. Gemville insists he is fine, but Horus firmly responds that the poisoning is far too serious to ignore. Ixion and Horus assure Gemville that once they find who ordered the poisoning, this issue will resolve quickly. Gemville remembers a dark-haired girl with a braid, wondering if she holds the key to the mystery. A nostalgic flashback reveals a young, dark-haired boy and his sweet sister walking hand in hand. The joyful girl promises her beloved big brother an incredibly grand gift in the future. Returning to reality, Brody looks up with a deeply concerned and hesitant expression. Brody questions how the injured Gemville managed to reach her room, and he gently corrects her. Brody anxiously asks if he is still in pain, but Gemville casually downplays his condition. Brody tearfully apologizes for the ice-cold drink, prompting Gemville to ask if she poisoned it. Brody vehemently denies the accusation, her tears spilling over as she asserts her innocence. Gemville softens his gaze and cracks a gentle, reassuring smile at her honest reaction. Gemville pats Brody's head, kindly placing the blame on his own lack of caution instead. Brody tries to protest, but Gemville warmly repeats that her innocence is all that matters. Gemville bids her farewell, silently resolving to resolve everything and return things to normal by tomorrow. A hand reaches for a uniform hanger as a shocked voice suddenly yells out in protest. Gemville calmly shrugs off the criticism while Ixion demands to know what is prompting his sudden behavior. Ixion expresses his disbelief that a severely poisoned patient is already up and moving around. Ixion is completely baffled and demands to know why Gemville is suddenly resigning from the guild. Gemville's thoughts drift to his homeland, Cortea, a small nation famous for its beautiful beaches and coral artwork. He remembers Cortea's lucrative mining industry, featuring rare, naturally glowing minerals that commanded exorbitant prices. As the noble heir to this distribution empire, young Gemville began his official training at 10 years old. His strict studies were frequently interrupted by his adorable little sister, Rayleigh, bursting in for a hug. Gemville would gently remind her of her classes, but she playfully insisted on staying with him. When Jumble urged her to attend her etiquette lessons, she whined about him getting to skip them. Gimble amusedly explained that he had already completed all those classes when he was even younger. Their parents would arrive, filled with laughter as their father swept the young girl into his arms. He fondly recalls his loving parents and his precious, sweet little sister whom they all adored. Gimble had everything a young boy could ever want, living a life of pure, uninterrupted happiness. Suddenly, tragedy struck as a devastating fire swept through, reducing their grand mansion to ash. Hostile allied forces invaded their borders, mercilessly burning the entire kingdom of Cortea to the ground. Amid the blazing ruins, their desperate parents commanded Jumble to protect his sister and survive at all costs. Fleeing with a group of refugees, Jumble guided his sister toward the safety of the Yulia border. Standing over a treacherous, roaring river, Jumble tightly grasped his sister's hand for reassurance. He took a tentative, creaking step onto the slick wooden planks of the suspension bridge. Heavy rain poured down, making the dark, dangerous crossing beneath them even more precarious. Jumble turned back to encourage his sister, urging her to take just one more step. Suddenly, the bridge snapped, violently separating their hands as Rayleigh fell backward toward the roaring waters. With a desperate, echoing cry, Rayleigh plunged into the churning depths and disappeared beneath the water. The other refugees forcefully held the devastated boy back as his hand reached out in vain over the empty cliff. Returning to the tense present, Ixion's angry voice snaps Jumble out of his dark memories. Akissian continues to press Jumble, demanding a real explanation for his shocking choice to resign. The other guild members return to the room just as Akissian questions Jumble's true motives. The female guild member overhears the heated argument and curiously asks Akissian what they are discussing. When she asks if Jumble is sick, Horace dryly replies that his state should be obvious. Horace bluntly exposes Jumble's plan, stating he is resigning merely to sweep the poisoning incident under the rug. The other members express their disapproval, noting that the official investigation into the poisoning is still underway. Jumble grimly defends his decision, declaring that his incompetence and carelessness make him unfit for his rank. Dismissing their protests, Jumble coldly bids them farewell and slams the door shut behind him. Horace sighs in deep frustration at Jumble's stubbornness as Jumble walks down the silent, empty corridor. A short while later, the scene shifts as the tension briefly subsides. Outside the grand quarters, an unfamiliar voice calls out to Brody by her designated number. Brody looks up in surprise as Akissian warmly announces that she is finally free to leave. Brody eagerly asks if they caught the true culprit, and Akissian gives her a reassuringly vague answer. Akissian kindly asks Brody how she is feeling, if she has eaten, and about her mood, to which she softly replies. Akissian gently reassures the sad girl, telling her that the poisoning incident is not her fault. A moment of quiet sorrow as Brody keeps her gaze cast downward in heavy silence. Akissian sits quietly beside the young girl on her bed, offering her silent comfort. Akissian looks at Brody, gently asking if she is worried about Jumble. As heavy rain beats against the window, Brody sadly whispers that it is all her fault. Brody looks down in despair, explaining that she blames herself because she failed to find the culprit. Clutching her blanket in frustration, Brody explains that she is simply feeling deeply frustrated. Akissian praises her fighting spirit, admitting he was worried she would just cry, and highlights that she learned a lesson. Ixion turns back with a gentle smile as Brody calls out his name. Brody looks up, asking why they believe in her when she was the prime suspect, recalling how she was falsely accused in the past. She bitterly remembers how, back at the orphanage, they were constantly framed and treated like thieves as a part of daily life. Brody wonders why Horace, Halo, and the others still place their trust in her despite Jumble being severely hurt. Ixion looks at her warmly, asking if she is truly curious about the reason. A warm hand gently pats the upset girl on her head, offering silent comfort. Ixion explains they believe in her because they are comrades, asking who else they would trust if not one of their own. Suddenly, Lexiad enters the room and questions what they are doing, drawing Brody's attention. Exilian cheerfully bids them farewell as he steps out, urging them to get moving. Brody walks alongside her companion, silently glancing back toward the corridor in deep thought. Akissian's warm words about trusting their comrades echo deeply in her mind as they walk. A soft, genuine smile spreads across Brody's face for the first time in days. Brody feels a warm, comforting sensation in her chest, deeply touched by having someone believe in her. A sudden flash of memory reveals a man with glasses handing over the poisoned drink, sparking a realization. Brody gasps as she vividly recalls the side profile of the suspicious green-haired man with glasses. The suspicious man stands in the foreground as the children walk together in the distance. Determined to catch him, Brody grabs Lexiad's arm and rushes off to find the suspect. Panting heavily in the garden, Brody laments that she lost track of the man despite running immediately. Lexiad points toward a stone pillar, asking if she means the person who vanished, and she confirms it was the tall, green-haired man. Lexiad asks if that man gave Jumbo the juice, and Brody confirms it but notes they lack evidence. Lexiad nods silently, taking in the crucial information with a serious expression. The two children stand together in the quiet garden path, contemplating their next move. Lexiad looks at Brody, questioning if she is suggesting that he is completely fine as well. Brody falters, looking completely unsure of how to answer his sudden direct question. He quickly explains that a culprit wouldn't find small children like them to be threatening at all. Lexiad smiles gently, noting that finding the culprit entirely on her own will be difficult. Clasping her hand, Lexiad asks about her clairvoyance limits, learning she cannot see inside bodies but can detect surface engravings. His eyes glow red as he realizes her unique ability is exactly what they need. Lexiad explains the culprit is definitely from the banquet, successfully smuggling poison and bypassing the truth serum. He deduces that only highly skilled individuals possess such abilities, suggesting a dangerous force is at play. Lexiad suggests searching for a hidden crest instead of suspicious objects, leaving Brody surprised. He explains that highly trained professionals who bypass truth serums always carry a hidden mark. Lexiad explains these elites carry invisible crests, reassuring a worried Brody that Jumbo is no ordinary civilian. Brody curiously asks how he knows so much, catching Lexiad completely off guard. Sweating nervously under her gaze, Lexiad can only stammer that he knows it just because. Brody cheerfully accepts his explanation, noting that being in a guild provides plenty of access to rare information. Lexiad recovers his composure, explaining that these invisible crests do not simply appear on their own. He details that the crest reveals itself upon unconsciousness, severe harm, or through a special potion. Lexiad warns that the culprit's presence means they haven't achieved their goal and will strike again soon. He explains that rare assets with poison resistance won't be discarded easily, and Brody firmly agrees. Reaching into his pockets, Lexiad reveals he swiped a special potion from his uncle's room to solve this. Lexia hands Rhodey a potion that reveals hidden crests on suspicious targets, leaving her surprised. Lexiad quickly gestures for silence as Roddy reacts with quiet surprise to his stealthy plan. Lexiad instructs Rhodey to find an opportunity to administer the potion, claiming shared responsibility. Roddy gratefully thanks Lexiad for his help, her spirits lifted by his reassuring support. Roddy hesitates slightly while holding the mysterious bottle, wondering about the potential risks. When Rhodey worries about losing the suspect, Lexiad confidently reassures her that his uncle will handle it. Lexiad urges Rhodey not to blame herself, and she softly agrees to focus on their plan. Lexiad suggests targeting a busy gathering spot, prompting Rhodey to ask where the members will assemble. Lexiad proposes checking the garden or lobby, then pauses to consider another potential location. Lexiad leans in close to whisper his secret strategy directly into Rhodey's ear. Soft footsteps echo quietly through the grand empty halls of the guild as evening begins. Roddy happily heads off alone while Lexiad promises to join later if she needs urgent help. Though searching for the suspect, Roddy becomes incredibly excited by the prospect of eating fresh food. Roddy spots two men talking in the dining hall, immediately focusing her attention on them. Silent whispers spread across the room as Roddy walks past the other guild members. Rhodey overhears a green-haired man named Tarek being warned to stay away from her by a colleague. One of the men notes that Roddy is just a child, unaware that she is listening. Tarek kindly approaches Roddy, triggering her memory of when he carried the juice for her earlier. Rhodey excitedly demands meat when Tarek offers to get her food, celebrating having found her target. Rhodey happily requests some lemon juice with her meal, maintaining her cute, innocent act. Tarek politely serves her a massive feast of delicious hot dishes on the table. Rhodey enthusiastically says she loves living there while secretly preparing to use the potion. Rhodey carefully drops a tiny bit of the blue liquid into the unsuspecting man's drink. Roddy offers him the spiked drink, and Tarek gratefully takes a sip without any suspicion. Roddy watches him closely, her eye glowing as she waits for the potion to take effect. A glowing purple crest appears on his neck, confirming to Rhodey that he is the true culprit. Suddenly, Tarek realizes what is happening and violently grabs Roddy's wrist, causing her to cry out. Tarek's friendly demeanor vanishes as he mockingly criticizes her for approaching him so affectionately. Confronting Rowdy in a sudden dark, oppressive atmosphere, Tarek asks if she remembers him. Tarek demands to know where she obtained the crest-revealing medicine, his expression turning malicious. The tense confrontation continues as the villain menacingly corners the terrified young girl. Tarek continues to interrogate Rhodey about the origin of the special potion. Tarek admits he knew she was unusual, but is surprised by her nerve in spiking his food. Tarek squeezes her wrist even tighter, aggressively demanding to know who instructed her to do this. Roddy remains completely silent, trembling under his terrifying, aggressive interrogation. Tarek notes that his glowing crest will completely disappear in just 10 minutes. Tarek resolves to eliminate her quickly, declaring he will not hold back for a child. Tarek forcefully drags Roddy away, threatening her to stay silent and cooperate. Rhodey panics in desperation, finding herself completely powerless against his immense strength. Being dragged away, Rhodey desperately wonders if anyone will help a framed outcast like her. She realizes that no one in the guild would trust or listen to an accused traitor. Murmurs and accusations from the other guild members echo around her as she is dragged away. Realizing she is completely alone, Roddy sinks into a state of total despair. Overwhelmed by fear, Rhodey's hope begins to fade as she is pulled into the shadows. In her mind, Rowdy desperately cries out for anyone to save her from this nightmare. Suddenly, a powerful blow strikes Tarek across the face, violently knocking his glasses away. Roddy gasps in sudden relief as her savior finally makes a dramatic entrance. Ekison stands before her with a reassuring, bright smile, bringing immense relief to the young girl. Earlier, Exian informs the guildmaster that they have narrowed the suspects down to 3. Ekison identifies the 3 suspects as Nilla Momentum, Mason Hill, and Tarek Rodgerd. Lord Eichless sits at his desk, frustratedly complaining about the time it took to narrow down the suspects. A missing potion bottle in the drawer is noted, indicating the suspect's hidden crests must be revealed. Lord Eichless asks his subordinate why one of the pink potion bottles is missing. The subordinate gets startled as Lord Eichless suddenly tosses a pink potion bottle to him. The subordinate questions using force, but Lord Eichless orders him to simply identify the suspects first. He commands his subordinate not to touch the suspects until they discover what they are after. Soft, steady footsteps echo quietly along the hallway as someone walks down the path. The blonde man carries the grumpy Rowdy down the stairs, explaining he was ordered to prevent her from running. Rhodey flails her arms as she insists she was on a mission, while the blonde man questions her actions. The green-eyed blonde man sternly tells her she was being reckless and asks what if she had been hurt. Roddy looks up with a sad expression, complaining that the suspect's crest was just starting to appear. The blonde man gently instructs Rowdy to apologize properly to Lord Eichless once they go inside. Roddy peers nervously over his shoulder, wondering if they are meeting the boss. Blonde man brings Roddy into the office where Lord Eichless and Lexiad are waiting. Rhodey is surprised as someone suddenly calls out her name. Lexiad looks nervous and apologizes to Roddy, explaining that his uncle caught him on the way. Rhodey whispers back reassuringly that it is fine because Akizian caught her too. Lord Eichless crossly scolds the 2 children for running around and causing trouble. Rhodey protests her innocence, but Lord Eichless confirms he already knew she was not the culprit. Lord Eichless hands Roddy a pocket watch, explaining the lion crest proves the suspect belongs to Hiker. Lord Eichless reveals he planned to leave the spy alone until they targeted their objective. He glares at the children for recklessly stealing his potion, prompting Lexiad to apologize again. Roddy holds the watch in confusion, questioning why a family member would target their own estate. Lexiad explains his grandfather dislikes his uncle, while Rhodey remains puzzled by the family conflict. A comforting hand gently pats Roddy on the head, reassuring the young girl. Lord Eichless smugly suggests it is because he is too handsome, making Roddy call him a liar. He gazes down softly at the girl as his hand remains gently resting on her head. Lexiad asks Rhodey to understand their complicated family, and she softly nods in response. Lord Eichless dismisses them, telling them to run along and stay out of trouble. Rhodey pauses hesitantly, looking back at Lord Eichless with a worried expression. Lord Eichless turns his head, his sharp eyes catching her lingering gaze. Lord Eichless asks why she is not leaving, but her vague response only puzzles him further. Standing close, Roddy asks if the culprit is caught and if everything is over now. When Rowdy asks if Jumvul is returning, Lord Eichless says that is entirely Jumvul's choice. Painful memories of being falsely accused and cornered flash vividly through Roddy's mind. Just as Lord Eichless tells her to go inside, her lingering trauma of being helpless overwhelms her. Overcome with emotion, Roddy's eyes fill with tears as her face flushes with sadness. Roddy suddenly lunges forward and hugs Lord Eichless's leg, crying as he softly comforts her. Lord Eichless smiles down gently as Rowdy tearfully thanks him and admits she was terrified. Rowdy unexpectedly blows her nose on his pants with a loud honk, shocking Lord Eichless. Clinging to his leg, she looks up with teary eyes and calls out to him. Rowdy blows her nose on his expensive pants again with a loud honk, testing his patience. Lord Eichless lets out an exhausted sigh and asks what she wants now. Rowdy beams a bright tear-streaked smile and excitedly declares she is going to get Jumvul back. Standing by the sunny beach, Jumvul reflects on how the ocean waves bring him peace of mind. Jumvul hears a rustle and turns to see the entire guild arriving at the beach to greet him. Jumvul freezes in comical shock as he processes the sudden appearance of his comrades. He stands completely sweat-dropped and speechless, utterly bewildered by their unexpected visit. The cheerful guild members wave enthusiastically, shouting that they have finally arrived at the beach. Jemvil's blank, stunned expression remains as he stares at his lively, smiling comrades. Roddy walks up to the beach, surprised and questioning why the other guild members are present. A sudden rustling sounds as the determined young girl leaps forward to catch him. The dark-haired man catches her midair with a completely bewildered expression on his face. He demands to know why she is here, and she happily declares she came to fetch him. While Jemvil reacts in shock, the others tease him about not hurting the newcomer. They playfully mock his behavior while greeting him with cheerful waves on the beach. The orange-haired man brightly announces that they are also on a beach trip just like him. The blonde men tease him about his rural vacation while pointing out a pretty lady nearby. The silver-haired man delivers a serious message from Iklas, apologizing for interrupting his vacation. Roddy looks up at him with remorse, tearfully apologizing and taking full responsibility. She happily raises her arm to celebrate their reunion as he continues to hold her. Although Jemvil thanks them for coming, he firmly requests that they all return home. Jemvil turns his back, coldly declaring that he has no intention of returning to the guild. His colleague dismisses the claim, but Genvil grimly reiterates that he is entirely serious. The subordinate and blonde man plead with him to change his mind and return. Yellow-haired man dramatically clings to his colleague, declaring their agreement to be destiny. A sharp tap echoes on the sand as Jemvil turns away, walking off into the distance. He turns back slightly with a stern gaze, reiterating that he is not messing around. His final warning echoes against the blue sky, stating his mind will not be changed. Jemvil continues walking away, leaving the silent guild members staring after him in deep concern. Her foot taps against the ground as she prepares to chase after the retreating man. The young girl looks ahead with a deeply determined and focused expression on her face. A sharp whoosh sounds as Rhodey suddenly dashes away, catching her comrades completely off guard. She sprints determinedly down the beach path, ignoring her colleagues as she pursues her target. Steady, heavy footsteps crunch against the sandy ground as Jemvil continues his solitary walk. Soft, quick, pattering steps echo closely behind him as Rowdy stubbornly follows his path. Jemvil walks past a large tree while the young girl clumsily attempts to hide behind it. A soft rustle sounds as Roddy peers from behind the trunk with an annoyed, determined pout. Jemvil warns her that she will get lost and tells her to stop following him. Rhodey giggles mischievously while Jemvil glares down at her with a deeply exasperated expression. Roddy firmly clutches his shirt, insisting on going with him despite him calling her stubborn. The young girl gasps in sudden realization, her wide eyes reflecting shock at what she remembered. She remembers a conversation about preparing for the return of his long-lost younger sibling. Jemvil looks down in silent contemplation as memories of his past begin to resurface. Flowing magical starlight drifts across the night sky, carrying the words of a cherished prowess. In his flashback, the young boy holds his sister's hand under the cold, pouring rain. He comforts her by promising they will build a happy new life together in Yulia. The young girl tears up in anxiety as she listens to her brother's reassuring words. Jemvil recalls making that desperate promise just to ease his younger sister's overwhelming fear. Glowing white flowers bloom softly, representing the enduring hope of their childhood bond. Roddy grabs his sleeve, insisting his sister is still alive and will surely find him. She reassures him that his sister will be incredibly proud of his many supportive friends. She urges him not to give up and to return to the guild to find her. The memory of his sister smiling through her tears flashes vividly before his eyes. Present Rhodey beams a bright, warm smile, surrounded by lovely white roses of hope. Overcome with emotion, Jemvil pulls her into a tight, silent embrace on the beach. A poignant question floats across the soft blue background, reflecting his deepest inner dots. A gentle patting sounds as Jemvil kneels on the sand, holding the young girl close. Jemvil lifts her up into the air, catching Roddy completely by surprise with his actions. Smiling gently, he relents and agrees to return since she is begging him so desperately. Jemvil offers to head back, but retracts when the young girl hesitates in response. With a sudden leap, Rhodey clings to Jemvil and insists on going with him. Holding her close, Jemvil asks if anyone mistreated her during his absence, which she denies. Rhodey expresses her deep gratitude to Jemvil as she rests her head on his shoulder. Jemvil reassures her that she has no reason to shrink back as long as she learns. Rhodey tearfully promises to stop calling him Mr., bringing a warm smile to his face. Jemvil's pleased agreement to her promise echoes against the bright, sunny sky. Carrying the young girl on his back, Jemvil walks away together with her toward the guild. Bright morning sunlight filters through fresh flowers, welcoming a peaceful new day for everyone. Inside the quiet mansion, a framed photo on the desk captures their happy beach memories. Recalling her promise, the young girl knocks on the door, excited for his return. Roddy looks around the hallway, starting to notice something is amiss in the quiet mansion. Rhodey realizes that the rooms and hallways of the mansion are completely empty. Exhausted, Rhodey looks around the courtyard and realizes Lexiad is nowhere to be found. Rhodey looks deeply concerned and worried about Lexiad's sudden mysterious absence. At night, a hand pulls back the window curtains of the dark mansion. Lexiad stands by the window, staring out into the night with a sad expression. A quiet thought wanders if something urgent has suddenly come up to cause this. The dark-haired man in a suit gravely announces that Lexiad is no longer coming. Roddy throws a dramatic fit, loudly accusing the boss of unfairly kicking Lexiad out. Pouting with puffed-up cheeks, the young girl fumes over the loss of her friend. Roddy looks dejected as she laments that their plans to play together are ruined. Resigned to her lonely day, Rowdy decides to go study first and walks away. Hand holds a test paper marked with a perfect score of 100 points. Rhodey excitedly shows her perfect test score to Fadrid, who commends her neat handwriting. Fadrid proposes raising the difficulty of her lessons now that she can read and write. Rowdy boasts about writing in 3 languages, leaving Fadrid speechless with a blank stare. Fadrid questions if Excian taught her those languages, and Rhodey nervously denies it. Fadrid tells her to refuse learning such words from Excian, and she happily complies. Chibi faces of her comrades appear in her thoughts as she ponders her choices. Fadrid tells her she can hit Excian if he teaches her inappropriate words again. Rhodey questions his advice on physical force, but Fadrid firmly stands by his word. Clenching her fists, Rhodey passionately declares that she wants to become wealthy very quickly. She envisions a joyful future of living happily with Jeno and Barry. Fadrid decides to test her readiness for a mission, opening a desk drawer. Fadrid presents a jewelry box containing a sparkling sapphire and a dark rock. Fadrid presents a hypothetical reward scenario, letting her choose first between the 2 items. Roddy immediately chooses the gemstone, prompting Fadrid to ask about her reasoning. Fadrid hands her the sapphire, confirming her choice and letting her keep it. Rhodey accepts the sapphire, politely thanking him while contemplating her choice. Fadrid reveals that the seemingly plain rock is actually worth much more than the sapphire. Rhodey stares in utter shock and disbelief as she processes the unexpected truth. Roddy grunts in surprise as Fadrid places the heavy, dark rock into her small hands. A quiet question arises, wondering about the true nature of the mysterious object. A close-up shows the rough, dark purple object resting in her open hand. Fadrid explains that the object is actually a highly valuable demonic beast's heart. Fadrid details its rare properties, explaining its use in making magic stones and scrolls. A heavy weight representing her failed choice humorously presses down on Roddy's head. Fadrid asks what she would choose now, and she regretfully admits she wants the other. Fadrid smiles with gentle amusement at the young girl's dramatic change of heart. Fadrid explains that completing a mission is good, but assessing the value of items is equally important. Fadrid chides the young newbie for failing to distinguish such a simple difference during her test. Fadrid notes that although the newbie possesses a highly unique ability, it requires proper application. Fadrid points out that having unique eyes is useless if she cannot distinguish valuable items correctly. Fadrid suggests she could take regular missions, but warns of the consequences of repeating her failure. He warns that colleagues might complain and label her an inefficient nuisance if she fails on missions. Seeing her completely demoralized, Fadrid reassures Rhodey that her eyes are indeed special compared to others. He proposes a better alternative where she utilizes her clairvoyance to handle only highly critical requests. When Fadrid asks which path sounds better, Rhodey enthusiastically chooses the most important missions. Fadrid warns her not to showcase her clairvoyance carelessly, as she could become a target. A dark, threatening silhouette holds a sharp knife near Roddy's neck, illustrating the potential danger. Fadrid gravely warns that she has only been lucky to avoid such danger so far. He explains that her unique ability truly shines when used in the right place and time. Reinvigorated, Rhodey enthusiastically promises to listen to Fadrid's guidance, earning his satisfied approval. Fadrid prepares a reward, noting she is already performing well enough in her lessons. Fadrid presents Rhodey with a small fabric pouch as a reward for her perfect score. Roddy beams with absolute joy and excitement as she holds her hard-earned reward. She opens the pouch to find sparkly, colorful candies, eagerly planning to boast to everyone. Rowdy happily skips down the hallway, deciding to show the boss first and request Lexiad's return. Rhodey suddenly halts in surprise as she notices someone else standing in the corridor. A stunning, elegantly dressed blonde woman wearing a lavish blue cloak appears before her. Flustered, Chibi Rhodey politely apologizes and informs the guests that outsiders are restricted from this area. The beautiful blonde woman kindly explains she has a scheduled appointment with Mr. Iklis. The elegant woman steps up the stairs, asking if Iklis is currently on the 3rd floor. Roddy is shocked to learn the guest is the imperial princess who has important business. The blonde princess warmly introduces herself as Sister Lily and asks to be called that. Together, Lily and Rowdy arrive in front of the boss's grand double doors. Lily sighs with a mix of anticipation and anxiety before preparing to enter. Lily asks if Roddy is scared of the boss, but Roddy admits she is just nervous. Lily confidently suggests they enter now, catching the blonde woman slightly off guard. A hand turns the golden doorknob, opening the entrance to the boss's private office. They enter the office, and Eichless notes she likely picked up Rhodey on her way. Lily greets Eichless warmly while Rhodey stands quietly by her side, holding her hand. Eichless questions her visit, but Lily explains she came personally because he did not reply. Lily gazes at him intently, reminding Eichless of a marriage proposal she had previously made. Lily directly asks what Eichless thought about her proposal to marry him. Rhodey is utterly stunned, completely frozen in shock by the sudden mention of marriage. The shocking realization that the boss might marry Princess Lily sends Rhodey into a panic. Rhodey gapes in utter disbelief, mentally screaming about this monumental breaking news gossip. Rhodey immediately turns to bolt away, eager to share the massive news with Fodred first. Before she can escape, Eichless grabs her by the collar, asking where she thinks she is going. Rhodey nervously makes an excuse about the bathroom, but Eichless threatens her if she spreads the rumor. Eichless pinches her nose, knowing her mouth is already eager to gossip about the proposal. Rhodey desperately pledges her loyalty, but Eichless tells her to wipe the drool first. Turning back to Lily, Eichless dismisses her request, stating he is busy, unlike some people. Eichless confidently boasts of his own qualities, while Lily flatly states he is not her standard. Lily insists that a high-standard person would choose her, listing her wealth, power, and beauty. Eichless leans in close and whispers in Lily's ear, asking if she knows she is oblivious. Eichless flatly rejects her, stating she is not his type, leaving Lily completely stunned. When Lily asks about his ideal type, Eichless describes a simple commoner, rejecting her date offer. Lily suggests Eichless might eventually grow to like her, but Eichless immediately shuts down the idea. Clenching her dress, Lily asks if he is truly completely uninterested, which Eichless flatly confirms. Looking highly exasperated and distressed, Lily formally addresses Eichless once more. Eichless coldly tells her he is busy and demands to know how much longer she will waste his time. Walking away, Eichless points out that her royal pride is stopping her from simply asking for his help. Eichless suggests that Lily has run out of viable marriage options because everyone else falls short. Eichless reasons that marrying him would provide her with a valuable noble title. Eichless coldly notes that using his illegitimate status would also help smear her detested father's reputation. Listening nearby, Rhodey is utterly stunned to discover that the boss is actually an illegitimate son. Rhodey recalls that Lexiad is Duke Huckerman's grandson, while Eichless is Lexiad's uncle. A quiet revelation explains that the Duke does not particularly care for Eichless. Rhodey stands completely frozen in place as she processes this shocking family dynamic. Rhodey wonders if the previous attack on the boss was motivated by his illegitimate background. Lily tries to explain her intentions, but Eichless dismisses her and demands she leave immediately. Lily admits she wanted to ally with him to get back at someone they both dislike. Eichless counters that there is no mutual benefit for him to join forces with her. Eichless bluntly tells Lily that she has nothing of value to offer him. Eichless warns her that her actions will only look like a spoiled princess's childish rebellion. He advises her to choose her opponents wisely if she ever hopes to challenge someone properly. Sitting on his lap, Rhodey asks why he dislikes the pretty princess, but Eichless claims he is more handsome. Eichless glares at Rhodey, demanding she agree with his self-proclaimed superior looks. Rhodey changes the subject to proudly show off the candy pouch she received as a reward from Fadrid. Eichless briefly praises her achievement, bringing a sweet smile to the young girl's face. The boss looks back at her as Rhodey suddenly addresses him with a more serious expression. Rhodey expresses her concern about the potential consequences of turning away such an important princess. Rhodey sadly notes that the princess looked as though she was on the verge of tears. Eichless reassures her that he is not afraid of any potential danger that might arise from this. Rhodey is horrified as she imagines the boss taking extreme measures to solve their political problems. Eichless pinches her face, teasingly declaring her an accomplice now that she has heard everything. Rhodey happily munches on strawberry candy as Eichless tells her to leave now that she is fed. Rhodey surprises the boss by suddenly declaring her firm intention to protect him if danger ever comes. Rhodey explains she decided to befriend the princess to protect him from any future threats. Rhodey puffs her cheeks proudly, eagerly seeking his praise for her clever utility. Boss gives a warm, amused smile, teasingly saying he is deeply moved by her devotion. The scene shifts as the crestfallen princess slowly walks down the grand mansion stairs alone. Lily recalls how her father planned to crown her foolish brother and use her for political marriage. She wanted to choose a husband she knew who could help ruin her detestable father's plans. She remembers seeing Eichless at a formal gathering and thinking he was the perfect candidate. She recalls previously confronting him about his rude behavior, though she ended up apologizing. In her memories, a younger Eichless coldly noted her self-awareness regarding her awful attitude. Lily laments that she completely misjudged his character, remembering him as much more of a gentleman. She admits to herself that trying to keep her royal pride while begging for help was a mistake. Returning to the present, Lily sadly wonders how he could treat her so coldly. Lily's attention is drawn to a familiar long-haired blonde man standing in the corridor. The elegant blonde man bows politely, warmly greeting her after their long time apart. Lily notices his formal way of addressing her is changed, acknowledging she is no longer a child. High angle shows the two conversing in the hallway, expressing mutual happiness over the reunion. The blonde man gently holds her hand, asking her to keep him updated on her well-being. Meanwhile, Roddy happily skips down the stairs while enjoying her delicious strawberry candy. Roddy suddenly stops in her tracks as she spots something unexpected in the hallway ahead. Roddy stops on the stairs as she suddenly remembers she forgot to ask the boss about Lexiad. Roddy considers the possibility of Lexiad inheriting the title, realizing it might actually be a favorable position for him. As her boot takes another step down, she ponders the weight of successors and noble titles. She recalls seeing Eiklis and Lexiad together, noting that they didn't seem to be on bad terms. However, she sweat drops as she quickly reevaluates, imagining sparks flying between them. A sudden exclamation catches her off guard, and she peers down the stairs to see Princess Lily calling Jean her family. Lily sighs with a bittersweet expression, apologizing for making things awkward and preparing to leave. Jean bows respectfully to the princess as she prepares to depart, while Rhodey watches from the stairs in complete shock. Rhodey clutches her chest in utter panic, realizing she has accidentally stumbled upon yet another massive secret. She mentally processes the shocking revelation that Jean and the princess are actual siblings. Roddy flinches in surprise when Jean's voice suddenly sounds behind her, calling out her name. She looks up nervously, caught red-handed, lingering near the staircase. Jean gazes down at her with a calm, unreadable expression. Jean asks if she has been out here the entire time, and Rowdy nervously admits she just came from the boss's office. Jean quietly acknowledges her response, looking thoughtful. Jean explains that he was looking for her to lead her afternoon training session. Roddy perks up and explains she was carrying files to Padrid on the boss's orders. A gentle hand takes the paper folder from Rowdy as Jean offers to walk together. Jean offers a warm, reassuring smile as he kindly carries the heavy documents for her. A steady click-clack of footsteps echoes through the corridor as Jean addresses her. Holding her hand, Jean gently asks if she overheard his conversation with Princess Lily. Rowdy looks down guiltily, confessing that she actually heard the entire thing. Jean smiles softly, expressing his gratitude for her honesty. Holding up a finger to his lips, Jean politely requests that she keep their connection a secret. Roddy is surprised to learn that even the boss is kept in the dark about their sibling relationship. Standing before a grand illustration of the palace, Jean promises to explain the full story to her later if she keeps quiet. Rhodey beams brightly, enthusiastically promising to keep her lips sealed. Jean chuckles warmly as Rowdy proudly declares that no amount of gold or snacks could make her talk. A soft creaking sound fills the air as Jean opens the door, quietly stating they are no longer siblings. Jean invites her inside, leaving Roddy to ponder his cryptic past-tense description of their bond. Chibi Rhodey is completely baffled, wondering how blood relatives can simply stop being family. Ixivian greets her warmly as they enter the administrative office. Padrid welcomes Jean back and notices he brought Rowdy along with him. Padrid thanks them for the delivery, instructing Jean to meet the boss on the third floor later. Padrid inquires about Jean's availability for a special request tomorrow. Padrid presents the files, explaining that a premium-paying client has requested a guild executive. Rhodey's eyes sparkle with excitement as she realizes the client must be incredibly wealthy. Keesian explains that high-profile clients pay massive fees to secure top-tier guild protection. The group shares a lighthearted laugh as Jean reviews the simple nature of the mission. Jean notes the task is a basic courier run and agrees to handle it. Jean accepts the assignment, planning to return by tomorrow morning. Ixivian suddenly gasps in realization, drawing everyone's attention. Ixivian explains he has his own assignment tomorrow and was hoping Jean could watch over Roddy. Akisian's eyes sparkle as a mischievous plan forms in his mind. Ixivian enthusiastically suggests that Rhodey tag along with Jean on the mission, thrilling the young girl. Jean has no objections but cautiously warns that Rhodey must not be exposed to any danger. Padrid reassures them that the client is fully vetted and completely safe. Padrid explains the mission is backed by the Magic Tower's management, ensuring zero legal or physical risk. Padrid promises to organize backup as Roddy cheers in pure delight over her very first official mission. Ixivian dramatically laments missing her big day, but warmly pats her head, reminding her to stay safe. Rhodey beams with a bright smile as she warmly thanks Ixivian for his encouragement. Padrid sighs wearily at his desk over the endless paperwork just as hurried footsteps approach. The sudden noise ruins his writing, prompting an irritated Padrid to yell at the intruder. Padrid looks up in surprise, questioning why Ixivian has returned instead of being on deployment. Out of breath and visibly panicked, Ixivian desperately demands to know her rodeos. Padrid calmly explains she is already on her way, causing Ekion to curse in sheer panic. An ominous question hangs in the air, asking what terrible event has occurred. Ikision breaks the horrifying news that Miriam was recently found murdered, leaving Padrid completely stunned. Meanwhile, Rhodey happily strolls hand-in-hand with Jean toward their waiting carriage under a dark sky. Clutching her colorful lollipop, Roddy reacts with wide-eyed surprise to a sudden revelation. A sparkling star-patterned bow with a dark gem sits beautifully in her red hair. Jean warmly compliments her new accessory, and Rhodey joyfully promises to cherish his gift forever. Rhodey sweetly adds that she will treasure the delicious lollipop he gave her as well. Jean suddenly offers a sincere apology, catching Rhodey completely off guard as she questions him. He apologizes for keeping his royal sibling connection a secret from her during their previous conversation. Jean explains the complicated truth, revealing that he and Princess Lily actually share the same father. Rhodey curiously inquires if Jean also used to live within the walls of the Imperial Palace. Jean recalls living in the Grand Palace until age 10, constantly subjected to cruel classist abuse. He remembers being bitterly scolded by a cold noblewoman who demanded he stay out of her sight. His mother desperately pressured him to excel, hoping to earn the distant emperor's attention. She tearfully pleaded with him to endure the pressure just a little longer for her sake. The painful memory of enduring those harsh expectations for his mother's sake weighs heavily on him. Roddy wonders why he left, and Jean explains his presence made the palace nobles highly uncomfortable. He reflects on how yesterday's encounter was his very first reunion with the princess since his departure. Roddy quietly contemplates his words while thoughtfully enjoying her sweet lollipop. Roddy asks about their age difference, and Jean reveals the princess is 2 years younger than him. Rhodey excitedly notes the boss shares the same age difference, which Jean calmly acknowledges he knows. Sensing her intense stare, Jean curiously asks why she is looking at him so strangely. Rhodey doubts the boss's claimed age, though Jean remains skeptical of her playful theories. Rhodey warmly expresses her gladness that he left the palace, prompting Jean to ask for her reason. She simply explains that it is because he is such a kind and warm-hearted person. Jean is visibly touched by her pure-hearted compliment, staring at her in quiet appreciation. Roddy playfully explains that the palace foolishly let him go because they failed to recognize his gentle nature. She adds that if he had stayed there, he wouldn't be with her now, which she would hate. She mentions that Padrid also told her having Jean around is an absolute blessing. With a beaming, cheerful smile, Rhodey enthusiastically declares that she completely agrees with Padrid. Deeply moved, Jean smiles down at her with immense warmth and calls her name. Mugly and Serenia suddenly approach, playfully asking what secrets the two are whispering about. Rhodey cheekily declares their conversation a secret, leaving Mugly dramatically lamenting being left out. A cute, tearful chibi graphic expresses a lighthearted apology for the playful exclusion. Mugly begs to pinch her chubby cheeks as compensation, and Rhodey generously grants permission. Mugly happily squishes her soft cheek, much to Rhodey's slight but adorable discomfort. Serenia quickly reprimands Mugly for his behavior, though he defends himself by citing Rhodey's permission. Rhodey cheerfully confirms she allowed it, leaving Serenia staring in silent, defeated amusement. Mugly shamelessly begs Rhodey to praise him to Exilian, but is immediately shut down by their senior. Senior apologizes to Jean for the group's antics, announcing that the carriage repairs are finally complete. He calls out to Serenia as they prepare their equipment to depart on their journey. He instructs Serenia to ride ahead on horseback, ignoring her complaints as they coordinate who will drive. Serenia reluctantly takes the reins, grumbling as he reminds her she came along specifically to escort Rhodey. As they prepare to ride, they discuss their vital cargo, a groundbreaking artificial heart prototype. Serena wonders aloud to her colleague about the possibility of resurrecting the Beb. The carriage travels through the town as a mysterious voice answers evasively. Jean watches silently from a distance as the carriage and escorts finally arrive. Roddy reflects on resurrecting the dead before observing a remarkably pale laboratory scientist wearing glasses. Camille introduces himself to Jean, who responds by offering his name in return. Camille questions the extra personnel, but Jean reassures him they are only present to assist. Camille explains that the cargo is secured in a magical box designed to endure physical impact. Jean expresses his relief that the cargo is safe from physical damage. As Camille explains the delivery destination, Rhodey peers out and suddenly makes a shocking discovery. Mugly notices Roddy's sudden distress, prompting her to urgently warn him that something is deeply wrong. Rhodey insists they cannot depart yet, desperately begging Mugly to help her capture Camille. Rhodey emphasizes the need for stealth, leaving Mugly completely bewildered by her sudden demands. Rhodey abruptly rushes over to Jean, calling out his name to halt the departure. Jean asks what is wrong, and Roddy points to the brooch she gifted her earlier. Rhodey fabricates a lie, claiming Mugly stole her brooch to swap it with his own. Jean silently gazes down at Rhodey, processing her strange explanation with a serious look. Camille questions Roddy's presence, but Jean defends her while Camille impatiently urges them to leave immediately. Camille silently judges the guild's professionalism while Roddy watches him closely, hiding behind Jean. Jean coldly guarantees the safe delivery, prompting Camille to apologize for his tense and impatient behavior. Camille continues to stress the mission's importance as the heavy cargo is loaded into the carriage. Rowdy suddenly interrupts the loading process, warning the handlers not to lift the box that way. Rowdy shocks everyone by declaring that the magical box has been switched and is completely empty. Roddy grimly reveals that instead of the prototype heart, there is a dead body hidden inside.